Broadcast has
Okay,
broadcast has been set.
thank you so much. The time is now 5:06 p.m. and the February 27th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting will come to order. I want to ask all board members in attendance, if you are on the Zoom, if you can just ensure that your mic is muted and when you're not speaking so we don't have any background noise. We really appreciate it. And I want to say good evening and welcome to the February 27th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting. I am Jonathan Briggs, Chair of the Policy and Governance Committee and member of the board. It brings me great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting, and I look forward to our work tonight. We will now have introductions of our committee members, starting with board members, followed by administration staff, then board office staff, and the board legal counsel. So I will turn it over to, doesn't like we have our vice chair, so I'm going to turn it over to our committee members, and Dr. Miller, if you'd like to go to kick us off, appreciate it.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Dr. Juanita Miller, member of the Policy and Governance Committee. And I'd like to also, in advance, thank the staff for the information and data collected to help us facilitate this meeting.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ran Rivera Forbes, and I'm the student member of the board on the Policy and Governance Committee. I'm also the vice chair, so sometimes I am coming out of school when meetings are starting.
Is that a military uniform you have on?
It is Air Force Junior ROTC.
Show your stripes.
So, see everyone, I'm in ROTC.
All right.
That's great. Other committee members, Ms. Walker?
Hey there. Yes, I am Lolita E. Walker. I'm the vice chair of the board. I am driving, so I apologize for not showing my picture, but I'm just super excited as to the progress that we've made together as a committee. Thanks. Excited to be here.
Great. Administration staff?
Good evening. I'm Robin Walsh, Director of Government Relations, Compliance, and Procedures, and we have two special guests here this evening, so I'll let them introduce themselves.
Good evening. I'm Christy Murphy Baldwin, Chief of Human Resources, under which the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Belonging is housed.
And good evening. I'm David Reese Jr., Director of the Office of Equity, Diversity, and Belonging. It's an honor to be here with you all this evening.
I think Mr. Fitzpatrick, this is probably...
Good evening. I'm Ravel D. Fitzpatrick, he, him, his, and I'm the director for the Prince George's County Board of Ed. Thank you all so much for watching.
All right. And we can move to board office staff.
Hi, everyone. Cindy Adlin, Board Office Secretary and Assistant to the P&G Committee.
Great. And last but not least, our board counsel, legal counsel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dennis Whitley III. I'm a partner at the law firm of Shipley and Horn, and we are board counsel.
Great. Well, I want to just echo what Dr. Miller said. Thank you so much for everyone who's taken the time to put together this, all the resources for tonight's meeting, including the outreach to administration staff members, and I think just the robust pieces that we've done around the policy development. So echoing Vice Chair Walker, it's been a lot of great work and we're excited to continue that work. We're going to move to item 1.3, adoption of the meeting agenda. Colleagues, before I call for a motion to accept the agenda for tonight, please be aware that there are a few changes. So one, after item 2.0, we'll consider items 4.1, policy 0101, educational equity. This is being done to accommodate the schedules of our visiting speakers. And then 2, policy 2600, records and documents management program, policy 0125, non-discrimination, are taken off the agenda to give the administration additional time for review. So may I have a motion to adopt the February 27th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda as amended?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The February 27th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda is adopted as amended. Item 1.4, approval of the committee meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the February 13, 2023 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Is it moved and seconded? Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The February 13, 2023 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes are approved. We're now going to move on to item 2.0, public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. Tonight, there are no public comment speakers this evening. But we do want to say that we're always excited to have, members of our public come and share their thoughts. So please, if you're watching this, and if you have perspectives, opinions, even if you feel like it is a small tidbit, it's always useful for our committee and for the board to hear that, and we welcome you joining. So given that we have no registered public comment speakers, we'll move past this section. And then I do want to acknowledge Mrs. Welsh before I proceed to the next item. Mrs. Welsh.
So we are moving into the next item right now for the equity. Is that what you're saying?
Well, we're going to pause for your question, but then I think we're going to move to, yes, education equity. Oh, is that what you were doing, raising it for the introduction?
I don't know what my question is. What is it?
You raised your hand.
Oh,
but-
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I didn't even see it on. I'm sorry. I have no questions. I apologize.
You're fine. No, you raised your hand and then it went down. And I was like, I feel like that was an accident, but I
It
wanted
was
to.
an accident. I didn't even realize I touched it. Sorry.
It's fine. All right, so we're going to move to item 4.1, policy 0101, educational equity. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to introduce her guest and provide the committee with an update on policy 0101, educational equity.
So we are very fortunate this evening to have with us Dr. David Reese, who is our Director of Equity, Diversity, and Belonging, as well as our Chief of Human Resources, Dr. Christy Baldwin. So at our last meeting, we began the process of discussing and revising the equity policy. And in the conversation, I asked the committee whether or not they would like to hear from you, Dr. Reese, in terms of the things that your office has been doing, because I know you've been involved in many different types of equity activities for the school system, and every single person on the committee was, yes, please come. So you're here this evening, so we'd love to hear from you before we go into the policy and just hear, because then that might cause more further discussion with the policy. So if you would please share your information, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Robin Welsh, for the introduction. And I have a question for the group. Do you see a screen that has data on it?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm not sure how well you can see it, but I want to start with a story. And I remember when I was not in Prince George's County, so I have a history in this system of being a consultant. And then I was a student earning his doctorate while working in the district. And that was a whole nother story. I could tell you all about that later. But then I joined in 2014 in the Office of Continuous Systemic Improvement. I left the district in 2018 and returned in 2020 in February, right before the pandemic started. And in that 18-month time period, when I was no longer in the system, I remember when this equity policy came on board in, I think, April 2019. At the time, I was working for an organization called the Leadership Academy based in New York City, doing national equity consulting. And I remember sending the current CEO at the time and some others some feedback on this equity policy that I thought was absolutely outstanding and what it was aiming to achieve in Prince George's County. And I was proud that the district that was still my home, because I still lived in Prince George's County, was really trying to advance some very serious work. At that time, I did not know that I would return to the district just months later, and I would have the responsibility of implementing that policy. But I remember a board meeting when the then chair, Alvin Thornton, said that if this work is done well with this equity policy, it will pay the district in ways that we might not ever really be able to see or feel, because a lot of the intangibles in terms of satisfaction, people feeling like they're belonging, reduced needs for lawsuits and those sorts of things would come about as the result of meaningful action taking place. So fast forward to 2020, shortly after the murder of George Floyd, our then at the time CEO wanted to do system-wide professional development on bias. During that time, since our office only had 2 people in it, I took the opportunity to put some professional development together, and I had a series of questions that I wanted to kind of get a feel for in terms of what mattered to PGCPS in terms of equity. And I began tracking that data over time. So on the slide on the right, you will see that in 2020, there were 9,625 responses to a question. And the question at the top of the slide says, when problematic statements, for example, about race, culture, gender, religion, national origin, or other occur, how comfortable do you feel addressing them? It is important to note that we had about 19,000 employees at the time, so the response rate was nearly 50%, which is significant for Prince George's County. I got lots of feedback from people around the 6 questions to which they responded, and they knew that their answers would kind of frame the professional learning that we were going to do for the upcoming PD day. But what they did not know, that I was intentional in my design of the questions, because I knew that the feedback that I got, the quantitative data and the qualitative comments, would be the anchor for how we will move forward as a district connected to educational equity policy 0101. We then asked the same questions in 2022 in another PD, and we actually just asked them again today. So that survey is going out. And what you notice is that over the 2-year period, even though there's a different number of responses, in general, there is a trend where more people in PGCPS feel comfortable addressing problematic statements when they occur. And I always have to start with some sort of data and evidence to kind of ground the work that we're doing. So this is very big picture data, but it tells a piece of a story about a system that has employees and students who've been deeply engaged in having courageous conversations about all kinds of topics that generally have been taboo discussions in workplaces. So since 2020, our office has really done a lot of work, and we've grown from 2 people to now 3 equity coaches, 1 diversity strategy officer, and 1 education support person and a director. So we're now an office of 6, and our span and reach has been pretty incredible in PGCPS. And I want to tell you a little bit about my theory of action around how I knew the work needed to move in the system with this policy. Even though this policy explicitly calls for the creation of a new office, it was clear to me, based off my history in Prince George's County, that the work would only move if executive level leadership did their part in moving it throughout their divisions. So prong 1 of the theory of change is to make sure that each individual chief and the superintendent or CEO is aware of what their role is in advancing equity with whatever that might mean within their divisions. And there are lots of different stories I could tell you all about how that work moves in operations and human resources, in academics, and in communications. And if you ask questions, I can give you all kinds of answers and information about how that works. And there's so much that I could share, and I feel like I want to make this kind of interactive. So I want to get to your questions so that I can figure out how best to pinpoint the specific things that you might want me to kind of speak to. So I'll pause there, but before I open it up for some general questions, Dr. Baldwin, is there anything that you want to add or something that I should speak to more pointedly?
I don't have anything to add. I think grounding it in the beginning part of the discussion opens the floor to some follow-up questions, especially regarding the policy and how the work can continue to expand. However, I would like for you to touch on, I think, for the last 3 years, we've done systemic professional development days, which means from our executive staff to our bus drivers, transportation. One of the reasons why equity and diversity belonging is in human resources is because we are the one division that touches 18,106 employees. And we really do believe if we're going to create equitable landscapes for our children, for our students, that they actually start with our adults. So you actually do have a systemic PD coming up on March 4th, correct?
Yes, so on March 4th this year, our focus is on Black and Latino boys. Last year, we focused on national origin as a protected class, which means multilingual learners and newcomers, though they were our emphasis. And the year before that, we actually highlighted our brand new transgender or gender and gender diverse students policy and administrative procedure, which was an awesome experience for everyone in the system to learn about administrative procedures and changes as it connects to that marginalized population of students and staff members who are transgender, and a lot of really good work came out of that. Lots of eyes were opened with our systemic PD around Niños de Papel, where every single staff member got to kind of understand more of what the lived experiences are like for some immigrant populations. and focusing on the experiences of our Black and Latino boys who represent 65,000 of our PGCPS students and the hopes that we have for them in conjunction with the microaggressions that they experience on a day-to-day basis is really central to making sure that everybody feels that they belong. So what this looks like is our office speaking with students, getting students on panels, and creating questions for the staff to respond to as we curate those videos. We also create slides that have data and other provocative conversation prompts so that when our school-based equity leads and others turnkey the professional development, they're able to have all staff members engage with the same content, but in different ways. So from our office is small, like we have a very, very small FTE allotment, but we spend a lot of time doing trainer of the trainer sessions where we learn so much every day about how to be better PD providers and really hear about how best to help people who are closest to moving the work. And it's always a beautiful thing to watch how that professional learning kind of permeates throughout the system and becomes more than just a PD day, but it becomes a springboard to advocacy, to people having hard conversations, to pushing on leadership, to pushing on curriculum, to pushing on expectations so that more people have a better experience here.
Okay, and Mrs. Welsh, I think maybe just to help facilitate the conversation, I was wondering if you had the policy again that we could just have a quick recap of.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Can you post it, please, Cindy? So the policy is a revision of the previous policy. One of the big things that got changed really was just the format for how we now format our policies. But it did that much of what was in the previous policy still remains in the current policy. But it's more specific to what the requirements of a policy are supposed to have. And basically we have our policy statement that affirms the rights of all students to have equitable access to quality education that promotes college and career readiness, social and emotional learning, supports the holistic well-being of students. And then it goes into, if you continue, can you just keep scrolling down? All of these are position statements related to the commitment to equity for all of our students to be in equitable situation. And then we have the definitions, which the adverse childhood experiences were pretty big in the previous policy. So this is defined and referred to within the policy. And then if you scroll down further, Cindy, it also talks about community performance index measurables, which students are always dealing with on a regular basis, which impact their experiences in school and what we as teachers, educators, need to be prepared to, work with students on, and then cultural proficiency in terms of really ensuring that all of our staff and students are culturally proficient and have an understanding of other cultures. And then it goes in again to educational equity. If you keep scrolling further down, these are purely just definitions that are referred to as we go through the policy. And then if you go further, it lays out all the different standards that the policy is addressing. And so it first talks about the goals of educational equity within PGCPS, and they consist of the following, which again came from the policy previously. And then if you scroll further down, Cindy, keep scrolling, please, because I did add language that was requested. Okay, get back up there, please. So one of the things that was requested in the last meeting was that this talks about a welcoming learning environment. So Chair Briggs, I think you requested that I also incorporate culturally relevant pedagogy as well as diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I did incorporate that in the welcoming learning environment. And then we talk about recruiting and ensuring that our workforce reflects the diversity of the student body and the community. And if you scroll down a little bit further, Cindy, can you scroll down further, please? And then in terms of just keep scrolling a little bit further. Oh, wait, welcoming and empowering families to engage in their children's education and really being intentional about involving them as stakeholders in the entire, even in terms of decisions that we make related to our students. And then reviewing and modifying policies and procedures where we work to ensure that we're not impeding any equitable access for students and a wide variety of areas: discipline, extracurricular activities before and after school, academic resources, all the different programs that we have for students. And then we also talk about the PGS direct educational equity be addressed in the system's local ESSA, our plan, our consolidation plan, and that the superintendent shall designate an administrative staff person responsible for the facilitating, monitoring, implementation of those initiatives. And then that PGCPS shall consider community CPI measurables in all the plans for new construction and renovations of existing facilities. And in terms of distribution of academic supports. And then this one I also incorporated. It was again a sort of a conversation that we had from the last meeting, of which Board Member Briggs, I think you talked about. Also, PGCPS will address student behavior through the use of appropriate behavior interventions such as restorative practices and positive behavior interventions supports, which is PBIS. Evidence-informed practices will be utilized to address students' holistic academic well-being and social-emotional learning to assist students in developing a sustainable mindset characterized by predominantly positive feelings. Scroll down, please. And then attitudes, positive relationships in schools, resilience, self-optimism, a high level of satisfaction with learning experiences. That particular language actually came from the previous policy. And when you requested the about the social emotional learning and the also about restorative practices, Chair Briggs, it sort of made sense to put all that together because it really does all go together in terms of when we're working with students. And then it does direct the board to, the board directs the superintendent to develop action plans with clear accountability metrics and administrative procedures to implement the goals, outcomes, and strategies outlined in this policy. And then the superintendent is also charged with proposing necessary allocations of capital improvement operation budgetary funds and the hiring of professional development necessary staff to implement the said goals, desired outcomes, and strategies of this policy. And scroll down just a little further to see if there's one more. Yep, I thought there was. And then the superintendent will formulate the PGBS equity plan, which shall be required submission to the full board by the start of each academic year, as identified by the board's approved academic calendar, with a formal vote of affirmation by the board required no later than October 1st of the same academic year. So I think this particular provision here really does go to a commitment both on the part of the superintendent and the board in terms of ensuring that we're going to continue this equity work and go further to really make every effort for all of our students to have an equitable education and equitable educational opportunities. And then the last one, which goes to Dr. Reese's office, the board requires the superintendent to establish and maintain an administrative office dedicated to the implementation of the PGCPS equity plan. So that is it, short of the nutshell. I went through it quickly, so.
And I want to give one additional point that I want to raise for the committee's attention. And that is, when this policy was originally written, a equity-focused strategic plan for PGCPS did not exist. So when I came on board, I worked with Dr. Goldson and then the person who was responsible for strategic planning at the time. And we went through a pretty laborious and pretty robust process to create the T26 plan that we all see now. And it was at that time that we decided that the equity-focused strategic plan that has CSIs, critical success indicators, that touch the entire system became the administrative equity plan. So every single chief should see how his, her, or their work connects directly to some metrics that you see. And that is the reason why the school board might not have seen this thing that came before them every October 1st.
Yeah, that's really helpful context on both ends, and appreciate you all sharing all of that. So I want to say the floor is now open for discussion and comments. And you'll be recognized in the order of your raised hand virtually. If you can't raise your hand for some reason virtually, then just verbally let me know that you're interested in asking a question. Okay, well, I did have just a few questions. And first want to say thank you so much, Dr. Reese and Dr. Baldwin, for the presentation and just for all of your work that you're doing because it sounds like it's having a significant impact on our student community from some of the programming that you shared that you're leading. And so that's really grateful. I'm really grateful for that, as well as I think particularly for our students that are often go unseen because of their identity. So I appreciate that. I did want to ask about, Dr. Reese, you mentioned some of the initiatives that you're leading, like you talked about the, I think, upcoming piece around Black and Latino boys. But I was just curious, like, could you just speak to how you're breaking down the, how you're approaching education equity for this school year? Like, how are you approaching this? Is it different populations, or what's your approach? And if that question doesn't make sense, I can clarify.
Well, I think I understand your question. So we look at data every year to decide like what the area of emphasis would be. And then as you think about instances of discipline, instances of students not achieving at their potential, and the types of misunderstandings that we have seen culturally, we landed on a focus for Black and Latino males this year, which also gets into reasons of over-identification for special education, under-identification for talented and gifted, and those pieces. So our approach with the system is to really help reframe our thinking around what does it mean to be asset-based versus deficit-based, and helping staff understand how pervasive it is for us to have a deficit-based mindset when it comes to a lot of students and students of color and boys in particular, and that those mindsets and behaviors are probably the causes of some of our data looking the way that it looks. So we really want people to be introspective around what each individual is doing to contribute to the problem so that we get better. And so the approach is to be evidence-based around why we make the selection, and then put supports in place for people to kind of reframe their thinking and behaviors.
Okay, got it. I did have a question. So I know we have like some implicit bias trainings in Safe Schools and other things. Are there any things that you would recommend that you, just from hearing that quick retail of the policy, are missing? For example, there's like anti-racist curriculums, or there's, critical race theory, right? There's some things that are politically charged, but just curious if you have any recommendations.
Well, one of our book studies a couple of years ago was a book called This Book is Anti-Racist, and during our summer learning series, and we had about 1,000 staff members who participated in it. Our middle school RELA supervisor then made that book a piece of the curriculum for middle school, so that our middle school students are now engaging in these conversations around identity, bias, microaggressions, and how things show up, so that they're able to advocate for themselves. And I think that might be a part of the reason why we see some of the increased student advocacy that we see. But we also have created a new Canvas course around bias that we're helping to support our school-based equity leads for. We're actually trying to now create a CPD unit so that staff members can get professional credit for engaging in that Canvas course, which is pretty well designed, and we can send you a link to it so you can see it. But I think we have to be comprehensive and make sure that we invite all staff members to know how to call in individuals when they see problems versus, or sometimes calling out things when they're problematic.
Got it. I know my time is up, and I don't see any other hands, so I guess I'll go for another round, Cindy. And I don't want to dominate this. So if you do have a question, please raise your hand. But I do want to just say, so as far as the training goes, because I'm just trying to understand, like when we talk about the policy at a broad level, are there things that we should be recommending be included in here? I know that we have the administrative policy that can, be unpacked, but are there any things that from your kind of expert level view, you think, as far as being comparable to other school districts or being up to date with what's happening, are there things that we should be thinking about as a school board?
One thing I really want to elevate about PGCPS as a point of pride for me is that all really does mean all in terms of professional learning. And so when our former CEO brought me on board, I said, I don't mind being a small office. I have a lot of talent personally, and we have a lot of talent within the school district. If you give me time, I will make sure that the time is well spent on professional learning that matters. So as a Board of Education, I would encourage you all, as things are ever shifting, to always pay attention to the time that staff members are required or that's allocated for professional learning around these issues, and make sure that that is the thing that we're emphasizing, because we have quality professional learning that's happening, not just from my office, but from lots of other offices that touch cultural responsiveness. And I think that's the key thing that we want to protect: quality learning time for this adaptive work to take place. we're doing this in a way that a lot of other people aren't in other school systems. And I know it because my colleagues are like, wait a minute, you get like you get days to do this and time with people and the whole cabinet's on board, and their minds are kind of blown by it.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And Dr. Baldwin, you might be able to speak to this piece too, because it sounds like I don't know, Dr. Reese, you can correct me, but is it that if trainings have to get cut, this might be one of those ones that get cut? You said quality, making sure that we really are emphasizing the amount of time that they have for the training. So I'm going to pivot to Dr. Baldwin and see if there's anything there based on what Dr. Reese said.
I think what Dr. Reese was sharing and expanding on is it's not that it gets cut. What ends up happening is that we do not have a lot of professional development days built into our school year calendar. So, for high quality teachers and staff, we need to have more days. That is one of the reasons why Dr. Zuckerman and I took over the development of the calendar process, because we'd really love to look a long-term how we could engage in more professional learning opportunities than what we have right now.
And just to give a very concrete example of that, when we did the English language learners, who we now are referring to as multilinguals in our system, and newcomers, and we translated the professional learning to fit the context of our food services employees by connecting to culture and food and what happens around the world, and then connected it to our students. And many of them who wrote on their hand forms, some were writing in Spanish, some were writing in English, the amount of ahas that they had around how they could do things differently in the kitchens and in food services, and how they could interact differently with the students based off of what they now knew and understood, was truly transformative. And it's because of the operations team being very creative that they were able to create time and make time where that had not been the norm before. So I really want to just impress upon, number one, we have people who are being innovative and leaders who are trying to make it happen. But from a board perspective, mandating it by policy or thinking of ways of really holding our feet to the fire so that it stays consistent no matter what the changes might be, whether David Reese is here tomorrow or not, I think is very important.
And I would just add on, because I know your time, but just also we've expanded restorative practices to all of our safety and security staff. How awesome would it be if we could expand that to transportation? So, like Dr. Reese says, all means all. It's not just our teachers and administrators, because children do what you do, not what you say. And so that is really a focus of Dr. Reese and I, to make sure this work and these conversations span across the entire district and not just our teachers and administrators.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, well, I'm not seeing any hands, but of course, that doesn't mean that we don't have questions. It was a great presentation, so that's a good sign, but we may get some emails and other outreach outside of that. And so just want to say that I'm sure you all know that you're available for any of those pieces if board members, committee members have questions about the policy as they're reviewing it. So thank you so much, Dr. Reese. Thank you so much, Dr. Baldwin, for taking time out of your busy schedules. Colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion? I don't see much. I personally would like to have this for just another round of discussion. But Dr. Miller, I see your hand, so I'm going to turn it to you.
Okay, well, why do we need to have another round of discussion? You have your full committee here. There haven't been any questions. So what will be the purpose of holding off on it?
There are some things I want to, just based off of the training piece, want to include in there. Maybe that's something that I'll just recommend to Ms. Welsh. So I think that's probably the biggest piece. But beyond that, I don't think if there are no other recommendations, if you all feel that it's pretty good to go, then I think we can move it forward. But yeah, I just want to make sure that we.
Sorry, I couldn't get to my hand. Dr. Miller, were you finished already?
I had not.
Okay.
Also, Cindy, can we have the timer up? Yeah, that'd be helpful. Okay. So that was my answer to your question, Dr. Miller.
Okay, your answer was, but is it something that you can get, Ms. Welch? can include in this legislation?
Yeah, so it would be a recommendation based off of what we heard for an inclusion in this policy, which I can make today.
Okay, good. Okay, well, then I move that we move forward.
I'm going to go to Mrs. Welsh. I'm going to go to
That was-
Vice Chair Walker first, and then I'll come to you. Thank you. Are you done?
Oh,
Dr. Christian?
There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I
gonna-
was just gonna
You
second
gave us a
it.
hand before. Oh, okay.
I
Sorry.
was just gonna second it. Thank you so
Mhm.
much.
Okay, great. All right. Well, so we have a motion that's been moved and seconded. Are there any objections? Okay, hearing none, we're going to move forward with the policy being advanced with the additional recommendations. Mrs. Welsh?
So we need to discuss those recommendations now with the full committee,
Yes.
because we shouldn't be making changes to policy without the full committee
Yes.
involved in that conversation.
Yep. So, and I think that right now we have a quorum, so we have enough members to have that discussion. My recommendation is simply that the trainings, I think the piece that was recommended around ensuring that there are trainings for all staff members, not just teachers, so that language be included in there to identify, that we're talking about a number of different staff members.
Okay.
Also that there, even though I didn't hear particularly that there are any limitations on the trainings, but if there were, for whatever reason, cuts to a training, that not happen to this one. So that's the other piece I would include in there. It's just language.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
are we including Dr. Reese's recommendation in turn? Oh, I think it may have been Dr. Baldwin. The time needed to provide these trainings. In essence, add an additional date into the calendar year. Did we include that?
I want to recognize you, so you can include that to Mrs. Welsh, because I think that if that's what you would like to see in the policy. So I will turn it to you to just kind of state that again for Mrs. Welsh.
That we extend the time or give the more time that Dr. Baldwin recommended to provide the training and put it in the calendar. Because I think Dr. Baldwin, isn't that what your recommendation was or comment was?
I'll turn it over to Hi, Dr. Miller. It was actually Dr. Reese's recommendation, so I'll turn it over to him so he can make it clear.
Yes,
Thank you.
absolutely. So the idea that professional learning should be for every employee in the school district is a novel idea for most school districts. That being said, I wanted to say I was really impressed and proud of the fact that a lot of our operations staff, I could just pick on that division for a moment, they did what was necessary as best as they could to make it possible for people who normally hadn't participated to participate. And I would not want that to be based off of the will and creativity of a chief of operations. I would want that to be stipulated by policy so that if it's about cost for bus drivers, if it's about cost for food service workers, that they're able to come to work, be paid, and participate in professional learning and not have it. So that's what I think we need to stipulate in the policy, specifically time for them.
And Dr. Miller, you still have time, so do you have more?
No, that was it. I thought that was a good point that Dr. Reese made about the time being extended. And then I thought it was Dr. Baldwin said that they had not been able to add it to the calendar. So I guess I'm saying we need to put this time that Dr. Reese is mentioning and make it a part of the yearly calendar. Is that correct, Dr. Baldwin?
Yes, ma'am. And eventually, when the time comes, we'd like to bring it back to the committee and maybe consider to adding more professional development to the calendar in general so that we can continue a lot of the initiatives and creating some systemic sustainability. We don't have a specific date right now, but we do try to put in as much professional learning as we can. But it would be nice if it was set to say that once a year, for example, professional learning will focus on the equity plan or the strategic plan, so that then that dictates the entire system.
So why can't we do that now? Dr. Reese just said we could put, if we could make it policy rather than something mandated, well, not mandated, but something that is required for staff development to take place.
I would just yield that to the committee.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the committee is asking. I'm the committee. I'm number one of 4 on the committee. And I guess my question is, I mean, you all are the staff and you have to guide us in terms of creating policy as I see it. So in terms of creating this policy and assuring that we have appropriate funding, timing, and whatever else is needed, then we would develop the policy around that.
Yes, I think what we could say, and I will yield to Robin with her expertise in wording, to say something that Prince George's County Public Schools is committed to holding one professional learning day every academic year that's focused on equity, diversity, and belonging, and that is inclusive of all staff within the district.
Does that meet your what you're saying, Dr. Reese?
In some regards, yes. I'm going to give a slight push to my boss here, who is pushing the name of my office in the policy, which I think is important. But I also want to note that the work of the equity policy and some of those definitions that we see there, that professional learning could be provided by lots of other people in the system. Right now, my office has been holding a lot of the weight for that in conjunction with others. So I wouldn't be office specific, but I do think that connecting it to the plan, to the policy, is what's most important.
Yeah, I think it's just education or well, Dr. Miller, your time is up. So, but we happy to go to a second round if you want to share more. And I want to acknowledge, but I just wanted to close out that idea and say that yeah, I think if we're just saying education equity versus that long list of titles, that gets to the policy broadly. And that addresses the issue. Vice Chair Walker.
Yeah, thank you so much. I am actually in favor of a requirement of a policy to ensure that we have the right diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging training that happens. I guess as an overview, to just say educational, I guess my concern is that educational can comprise a number of things. And where we're trying to get is the granularity for our population of, you mentioned transgender, for instance, you mentioned LGBTQ+. If you didn't, then I know that's in there. And so the point is that I think that we need to be specific around those, because right now our policy doesn't hit it. And we know that this is now, yeah, that's where I wanted to go. It matters. And as we continue to, I know I had Dr. Reese at one of my community events a while ago. I feel like, was it Dr. Reese? Oh, I think so. Anyway, and I think that it's very important that we not only acknowledge that these populations exist, but also that we need to educate on this for our educators inside of the environment. Just wanted to say that. Thank you. Okay. And I think that we can dictate that through policy, and then I'm ready to vote.
So for clarity's sake, I just want to get something clear. So what we're saying is that one day, so what the policy would have language talking about 1 day of professional development for inclusive of all staff. So you could have for addressing equity, diversity, and belonging, as well as there should be language talking about and just generically about training for all staff members, because I do agree with Dr. Reese. You don't want to just say, oh, well, we're going to do this training 1 day out of the year, and that's the end of the story, because that research shows that 1 day of training doesn't change behavior. You need to have ongoing training throughout. So I think some generic language talking about we're going to make this a priority. And make sure that this isn't, that we extend time for training in general. And then what I heard Ms. Board Member Walker say is that, policy is not the place to put a lot of specifics, but we certainly could include language to address equity in terms of the different populations of people that we have within the system that we're addressing in terms of diversity.
That's fine, as long as we call that out, that it, training, inclusive of, then I feel good with whatever is the right, terms to put in. Thank you so much.
And I just wanted to thank you, Ms. Welsh, for repeating that all back because it makes a lot of sense. And I just wanted to, on a language piece for our committee, because I know that what we do is so important to the school district. I personally feel have feelings about the word dictate because it's just, there's a lot of heaviness with it. And I think that we are requiring, right? Like that is something that we're putting in there that's really helpful language for us, I think, as we're saying that, because we there's just a caringness, I think, that comes with that word
No
versus
problem. Thank you for the correction. We govern that, we make policy around it. We're the Board of Education. We definitely don't dictate. I appreciate you clarifying that. Thank you.
So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on the policy 0101 and bring it back, and move it forward for action at the next Policy and Governance meeting. Thank you for that. If you have questions about any of those recommendations, just let me know and we'll backtrack. And then I know you all are probably like so excited to stay on with us. So if you want to stay on, you can do that. But if you want to leave, you can also do that as well. Dr. Reese.
Thank you for acknowledging me. I would be remiss if I didn't make a statement. So it is not easy to work in a space where people are modeling professionalism and professional push. And so I just want to thank this committee and everybody who's on this call today for understanding that we get better when we can challenge each other, offer alternative points of view, and then move forward as a collective. If we keep doing this as leaders in the system, this is what our students will follow. So thanks to all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Reese.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, again, thank you, Dr. Reese. Thank you, Dr. Baldwin, so much for taking time out of your busy schedules. We're going to let you go to your life. You're always welcome back whenever you want to come.
Are we gonna take a vote?
Because
I think we voted, but then we had to do it again because of discussion. I'm not sure.
Well, I will ask the question again, and I think maybe that'll just help to. So I will say, if this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Parliamentary procedure. There's a motion that has been second, and then we had discussion. So we have to go back to that motion unless you ask me to rescind my motion and then make the statement that you're making. But technically and parliamentary and procedurally, there's a motion on the floor that's been second. We just had a discussion. So we either move forward on that, or the maker of the motion is asked to rescind.
Thank you for that clarification, Dr. Miller. Yes, I wonder, my request would be for you to rescind, simply because I know you made the motion and then we seconded and we voted, because I said if there are no objections. And then we were corrected by Mrs. Welsh that we had those additional changes to the policy. So if you could rescind your policy, then I'll go back to ask the question again. Motion.
As that motion, I will rescind it.
Thank you so much. So colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion?
It should be advanced.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And I know that because we just had this discussion, that we all feel this way. So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Policy 0101 and advance it for further action at the next P&G meeting.
But then at the next P&G meeting, I thought when we voted to advance it, it was to advance it to the general, the full board. Now I'm confused. I'm not clear on what you're saying, because you're saying advance. And when you say advance, my understanding of advance was that we have discussed this, we took a vote, and that the vote, we took a vote, and it was agreed that we would advance it. Now, when you say advance, you're saying advance to our next meeting. I'm thinking advance to the next level, which would be to the board. Now, please, if I'm misinterpreting it.
No, those are good questions. But I will ask that you raise your hand. But I'm going to turn it to Cindy, who can give us some clarification on this before we proceed.
So based on policy, discussion items do not call for a vote. So the question should just be either to advance it for action at the next policy and governance meeting or keep it for further discussion, because right now it's still in the discussion phase.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Miller's saying if we're advancing it, aren't we advancing it to the full board for their consideration versus the next P&G meeting? So is the language correct, Cindy? Or should I just?
We're advancing it to the committee because after this stage, we advancing to vote on public comment, for it to go out to public comment. That is when it goes to the board.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So right now we just in discussion. We shouldn't have a vote or a motion.
Okay. So that's the correction, Dr. Miller, to your question. I'm gonna go to Vice Chair Walker.
I don't understand what you're telling me.
I will come back to you, Dr. Miller. After I recognize Vice Chair Walker, I will come to you.
Okay, thank you.
Your question.
Thank you. I was actually going to just gain clarification on this. I think, Ms. Adeline, from what you said, just because I was also on the same realm of, what's holding us from taking it to our full board as a next step. But I think what you said, the clarification is we haven't yet sought public comment inside of our committee. Therefore, we have to move it. So I just wanted to make sure that was the gap. And after we do that, then it advances. Can you just clarify? Because I had the same question. Thank you.
Yes, you are correct. So right now we're just discussing the policies. Well, the policy from the discussion as a committee, we will then take a vote at the next policy and governance meeting that it be advanced to the full board for the recommendation to seek public comment. At this meeting, we're just discussing.
Are there other and Mr. Whitley, I'll recognize you, and then I'll go back to go to Dr. Miller for just any clarification if there's any left.
Well, I'll see if Dr. Miller has any questions. I was just going to comment that it was listed on the agenda as a discussion item, which I think precludes action from being taken on it. It would have to be listed on the agenda as an action item to be moved to the next step.
Oh, that is helpful too. So Dr. Miller, do you have any further questions?
Well, that clarifies it for me. I think I was confused when you were saying we would advance it, and I'm thinking we're moving forward. But Cindy clarified it when she says it has to come back to our committee for public comments. So I'm okay.
Okay, cool.
Just be clear, this discussion point is when Chair Briggs is saying advance to action, it's to say we're going to bring it. So now it's just to go through two review processes. OGC reviews it, the superintendent reviews it. Then it comes back, and once it's finalized, and at that point in time, you could still make some changes. But then the idea being that the whole purpose of it coming on the agenda is to take action so that we can move it to the full board for the recommendation for public comment.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Vice Chair Walker.
I just wanted to tell the public we're not really this confused. What happens usually, Chair Briggs, is that we have so much discussion on policy inside of this meeting that we never get to this point of not having to come back for future recommendations. And so I just thank you so much for entertaining it.
Yeah, and I also I know the public is watching and we want things to appear perfect, but they're not. And we're going to have moments where this is a learning experience for everyone, right? We're learning something together. I have no shame in it. So I appreciate the clarification. Thank you for calling it out. And please continue to, because if something's wrong, then we want to fix it. So that is, to Dr. Reese's point, that's the space that we want to create where we can correct each other and challenge you. There's nothing wrong with it. So we're going to move on to the next portion of the agenda and take care of you all. So this is item 3.0, legislative updates. This is the MABE Legislative Committee meeting update. I will provide the committee with updates from the MABE Legislative Committee meeting, and then I will turn to Mrs. Welsh to give more clarity around some of these priorities. So, actually, I think what I want to do is Mrs. Welsh, because I know we have the tracker up here. And I likely feel like it's a redundancy for me to mention bills and then for you to kind of fill in the gaps. I would just prefer that I turn this over to you to walk through some of our highest impact bills that were discussed during our May meeting on Monday.
Okay. Well, okay, so, and then I'll be covering some of those highest impact bills as I go through our list, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
So Cindy, can you put on the section that has to do with legislative update, there's what's called the legislative exchange, and I think that's probably the best thing to look at. Which is not connected to MABE at all. It's a separate document that I sent you later this afternoon. There you go. So I'm only going to talk about anything that is new, where you see new, because we previously addressed most of these last time, and so I don't want to waste your time, because I know we have a lot, and unfortunately, the first one I see should actually say support with amendments for House Bill 1317. So I'm not sure why is that version that's sitting here. But anyway, let me just go through these. So House Bill 1317 allows for some additional billing for Medicaid. So that's the part that we support, that we could be able to actually, because a lot of our students that receive special ed services, they many of those services can be billed for. So the fact that we could actually bill for some additional services would be very helpful for the school system. What we don't appreciate within the bill is that it's actually mandating what you can use the money for. And so that is not very helpful for, well, first of all, if you think about our platform and governance, the legislature should not be mandating to us what that money should be used for. That's a decision that should be made by the school system, because we know best what our needs are. So that's why we say support with amendments. The next one has to do with the criminal crime of violence, school degree, assault of school employee or subcontractor, School Assault Reduction and Prevention Act. And so there's in the law, there's this list of all these crimes that are considered crimes of violence. And if you look through some of our administrative procedures, you would actually see, well, one of our processes, why we actually do fingerprinting, this is a perfect example, why we fingerprint every single employee, volunteer, and contractor, is because what we're getting fingerprinted for, that people are getting fingerprinted for, is to see whether or not they have a history that they committed any of these crimes of violence. Because if that's the case, then these people are not allowed to work for us or volunteer for us or contract with us. So they have added on to that law where they would include also that what they consider a crime of violence, a second degree assault of a school employee or a subcontractor. So of course we absolutely would agree to that, because that protects our employees and our subcontractors. So that was a support. And then the House Bill 930, primary and secondary elementary education, public school attendance, children of judges. So that bill is talking specifically about allowing the students of judges to attend. They attend maybe not the school in their county, but a school in a nearby county, for the reason that if they're hearing a case, let's say in their county, and their children are attending school in that county, and the judge doesn't rule favorably and whatever, it does put their children in a position of possibly not being very safe. And so this allows them to be able to say, if you live in Anne Arundel, you could come to Prince George's or whatever. Or let's say you're a judge in Prince George's and you really would like to, you're concerned about the safety of your children because of the cases that you hear. So you'd like to send your child to like Anne Arundel or Calvert or whatever. So this just gives the opportunity. It's really about safety of students. And we do have that in our platform also. House Bill, the next one, House Bill, what's the next one down the line? Early pre-kindergarten providers, House Bill 1385. That one is actually talking about, it goes to the resident conditional tracking certificates, teaching certificates, excuse me. And that one has to do with opening the door for allowing making it easier to recruit these teachers. So therefore that goes to our platform related to recruitment and retention of employees. The next one, also the interstate teacher mobility, that is, again, goes to teacher recruitment, and it really does appear that it would support recruitment efforts, so we would want to, support that bill also. The House Senate Bill 63, motor vehicle, school vehicle drivers, medical exams. That one specifically talks about the bus drivers being evaluated annually, having a medical exam once a year. And we actually make our bus drivers get them twice a year. I think, no, it's once every 2 years versus once every year. So it actually would save us money if we did not have our bus drivers having to get that many medical examinations. So therefore we did support that one too. And then if you keep proceeding down the line, an initial teacher certification, that one is also related to the certification requirements. It allows for some mobility in terms of if you're coming from other counties or other state, not counties, but other states, and opens the door for us to be able to access more teachers because the teaching certification is not as stringent as it was previously. The next one, if you can proceed. You see, 797. My list. Okay. So access to attorneys, advocates, consultants for special education program. That one is, again, that belongs down with support of the excuse that one. I'll talk to that in a second. Hearing notice and bid advertisement. I know this one's student and school employee data privacy protection. And we do support that. Again, that it goes to the safety of student and school employee data privacy and protecting that data. So of course that would be falls in line with the platform, and both in terms of employees as well as our students. So that we did support. And then the last one has to do with that one we just went over, crimes of violence, second-degree assault of school employees and subcontractors. So I'm not sure why it got repeated, but anyway, we are going to support that because it does put you cannot commit a crime of violence against one of our employees or subcontractors. It'll be on the list for crimes of violence, which helps that in the fingerprinting that'll get picked up also. So now we're ready to go with supports of amendments. And the first one should be, let's see. PG 30224. No, keep scrolling down. There's not a new with it. Can you scroll down a minute, Cindy? There we go. Coaches and mental health training. So we do support that with amendments because we do believe that our teachers or coaches should have knowledge about mental health issues with students. However, in terms of the degree of the training that it's requiring and the fact that they'd be right out in the front identifying students with mental health problems, we don't believe that the training they would receive would not put them in a position to be doing any type of diagnosis. So we would want that language to be amended. And then if you go to Senate Bill, keep scrolling. Okay, Senate Bill 818, artificial intelligence and privacy, and the policies and procedures. So that one is a new one again. It came through. We had discussed it slightly before. There's no real fiscal impact for this one, but what it does do, it actually, this particular bill is fairly in line with our policy. However, it does require that we do collect information from vendors in terms of them telling us when they have incorporated AI into their programs or the things that they offer us, their online programs and stuff. And that we now have to actually provide data on that. And the unfortunate thing about that is that not every vendor is going to tell you that. It's oftentimes we are the ones that have to investigate to figure out whether or not AI has been incorporated into one of their programs. So, and it is an additional administrative burden. So that piece of it, we are requesting that they, that would be amended to eliminate that piece. And then the next one, House Bill 1076. We do support the whole idea of ensuring that students get that who are blind and visually impaired do receive their textbooks that are converted to Braille in time for the school year, because that is a problem. I know that from experience in working in another school system. And so we did support with amendment only because the concern is the time frame of when it's necessary to have that information in. And the companies that do the brailing, having that done within a specific time. I think I think it was amended to March and 15th. However, sometimes you have students that don't pick a program until maybe the end of the school year or something. And so it's not always possible to get the information and get the books on time if it's been a last minute decision. The next one is House Bill 115. This bill is, I think, a really important bill and a very important bill for you as board members to be taking a stance on. This one is the County Board of Education Budget Notice Transparency in Education Spending Act. And the reason why this is so important, so first of all, then we have support with amendments because of course, and I would think you all agree, we do support transparency of the budget as well as transparency of our expenditures. We're using public funds, so of course, the public does have the right to see what we do with the money that we do receive. The issue is that there is a provision within this policy that talks about changing the language, if there is a change in categorical spending of even 1% in a category, then that must go to the county council or county government to be approve that change. And so for us, for our school system that we're not talking, I mean, we'd be probably going to the county council frequently just because 1% is just way too small. And so our recommendation is 15%. Board MABE also believes that it should be 15%. So this is an extremely important policy. I mean, bill that should be, that I think would be helpful. I will tell you that the hearing on that bill isn't until March 7th, which is next week. So that does give the opportunity to be able to, for both this committee and individuals on the board to contact their delegates and also write testimony that would recommend that amendment. Chair Briggs, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly fact check. I know you said 15% for this bill. Just wanted to confirm that it was 15%, not 5%, because I think I remember.
I think originally they brought it up as 5%, but then I think they, I read somewhere that they then said 15%. Oh, I know, it was in the Green Street meeting, they brought it up and said 15%. So I
Okay.
think when they were having that vote, they made that change. Because I do remember a board member from another county saying, well, it really should be up to 15%. So evidently that must be what they ended up wanting the amendment to it, what they were recommending as an amendment, because Mr. Williams brought that up again last Friday in the Green Street meeting.
Okay, great.
So anyway, that one I did want to highlight for you. And then if you go to all the ones we oppose. So keep, Cindy, wait a minute. Oh, we're still, wait, let's see, we have a couple more. We did get this one changed. Oh, Senate Bill 64, House Bill 818. And there's another bill that's out there too. And I think we discussed this the last time, but we did not discuss it, this particular one. This goes to receiving a parent who volunteers, they can get income tax credit if in fact is the principal of the school and the board member for that district that school is located can sign off on the certification letter that says that that person did the volunteering. Getting the information about the student volunteering, teacher parent volunteering is not a big deal because we have Raptor, and Raptor can track all that information. That's our visitor management system. But I think where the real problem would be in, first of all, making sure the principal was always available to sign off, because many times they're involved in other things. So that should say designee, principal or designee. And I think it would be an administrative burden to then have to try to track down the board member and have the board member sign off when and then move all this stuff forward for the for the parents. So what our recommendation would be just for it to just say principal / designee, so that the parent could absolutely get the income tax credit, because it does encourage volunteering, and we are very supportive of volunteering. So so that was it for the support with amendments. And then can we go back up and go to the opposes? Okay, so these two bills, we have had many discussions. We put this on the opposed section because the board did first of all, our platform absolutely said that we would oppose those two bills, that was part of the platform. And then you as a committee and the board did end up writing a letter to the delegation related to these two bills and opposing them. So that's why they're there. And then if you proceed further down, or wait, can you go back up for 1 second, please, so I can see if there's okay, sorry, thank you. So then House Bill 1171, we do oppose that. We sent that to our health services department, and they were very clear that actually this is a direct violation of the Maryland Nurse Practice Act, and also our administrative procedure that states no medicine, whether it's prescription or over the counter, may be administered without a prescriber's order. And this bill actually says you wouldn't need to have any kind of a order from the prescriber. You could just go ahead and give out the medication. The next one, House Bill 1219, is a bill that we do not support. And that one is mainly because it is an unfunded mandate. I mean, right now, we currently require athletic directors, trainers, nurses to have current CPR and AED training. And we do have AEDs present in the schools. But the impact was, this bill would impact school personnel with the creation of the cardiac emergency response team, which would also be required for the specialized training. And then that team would have to be at every single sporting activity. And it would definitely impact us financially for non-duty hours for each sports and activities, because we would be paying for all that. So that's for that one. And then let's see what the next one is. House Bill 1257, restorative practices. So that particular that one is being picked up as an opposed, and certainly we can always discuss it, but it's because it's an unfunded mandate and it overreaches the governing authority of both the school board as well as the superintendent. There would be funding would be needed to provide training to school staff at a number of schools being designated as restorative schools. And the coaches would have to be identified, and the number of restorative schools then would require additionally salaried employees. The impact would almost create a dual position, since there's another House bill impacting peer mediation, and peer mediation is a restorative practice. So sometimes you hear people talking about like peer mediation like it's a separate thing, but it's actually falls under the category of restorative practices. So it is definitely a redundancy. And then there would have to be a behavior coordinator and a restorative practice coach, which is when the cost came together, it was for because it works out to FY 2036. So the actual cost by FY 2036 would be $19 million. So it's a pretty expensive proposition. And we have expanded restorative practices in many of the schools, and continue to do training on restorative practice. So it's not that we're against it, we're very supportive of it, but to have it mandated and unfunded mandated to that extent is why it's being opposed. And then the next one is the House Bill 1268. And that one is it'd be an overdose, reversing medications, and policy requirements. So that one is first of all, we already have a board policy that addresses the identification of drug overdose and the administration of overdose, reversing medication, and training of staff. So this is really an unfunded curricular mandate, and mandates, first of all, the development of a policy, which again is something that falls under the authority of the local boards, so the Board of Education. So that should not be something that's legislated. And then it's requiring things to be included in the health curriculum, so that impacts the curriculum. The next one, if you keep going, Veterans Days, excuse student absence, that one is opposed because you're talking now about students having one additional day off, which is I don't think it's always good to have so many days off throughout the school year, and that because it's important for continuity and instruction to continue. So that one is opposed. And then the next one is Asian American history. Again, this is a curricular mandate, which is requiring students to be the curriculum to be changed, the standards be changed, and that again is a function of the Maryland State Board of Ed and MSDE. And then the next one is employee training and Holocaust education study requirements, and that again falls under the unfunded curricular mandate. And then public middle and high school start times for instruction. So this particular bill, it wants to dictate to you like what time schools will start and when they will end. And again, the reason that one is opposed is because of the fact that it is absolutely, that's something within the purview of the board and the superintendent to make those kinds of decisions. So we don't want legislation, because that's not what's good for one county might not be good for another county. There's, so that's something that you all should be able to make that decision about. The next one has to do with, let's see, where do we go? Oh, 1441 and 1445, and Chair Briggs, those were two that were discussed at the May meeting, if you remember. And that one, both of those are very concerning. Mainly, they're both unfunded mandates that our staff came up with. The first year would cost us about $3 million, first of all. It is putting, it extends the responsibility of the school system to maintain ongoing collaboration, private providers. It's putting a burden on staff, fiscal, and human capital resources, given the large size of PGPS current pre-kindergarten programs. And then it's requiring that all of these people, even within the private providers, must participate in the professional development and all the meetings and the peer-to-peer meetings after the school day has ended, which much of this we can't mandate. We can't force our staff to work after the school day. And then there's also they would have to compensate childcare staff, would be an additional financial burden, as well as and our staff wouldn't even receive the compensation. But the other thing had to do with the certification requirements of anyone teaching MSDE, teaching preschool. What that's saying is that they would only have to have associate's degree for it to teach the preschool programs. And this it's not aligning with the MSDE certification. It's actually the certification that's required for paraprofessionals in the pre-kindergarten classroom. And that our staff feels strongly that is not appropriate, that if you're a teacher of preschool, you absolutely should be meeting all of the certification requirements. And I'm going to take it just a step further. So I actually started in education as a speech pathologist, and I taught a special pre-K class. And even though that was with children with disabilities, I am absolutely convinced that our preschool teachers are very critical players in the education of our students, because they are the ones that lay the foundation for our students. And if they are not adequately trained to be fully informed about all the developmental stages of students, because when you're looking at 4-year-olds, there's wide variety in development coming into the classroom, and they need to be able to be able to deal with that and each of the developmental areas, as well as they're beginning the process of teaching reading and early math concepts. Which teaching of reading is very technical. So it is extremely important that these people are well trained to do that job. So that in itself is the main reason why we would have difficulty supporting a bill which lowers those standards for those students. And 1441, they're opposing. 1445, I think, is the one that they have support with amendments, but it's very similar to the other one. And so therefore, for the same reasons, we are opposing both of those bills. And then 1485, which is water and swimming courses, those are being opposed. That one's being opposed because it's a curricular mandate. And there is, there was one. Can you scroll down? Because I don't see it here, but this is one that I think is important for, oh, here we go. Here's some more. There we go. So, 2, House Bill 1175 is very important because that one has to do with, it interferes with our ability to subcontract or contract for services. And basically says that we aren't allowed to do the contracting. And if you look at the staffing we have for our speech pathologists, OT, PT, psychologists, our mental health clinicians, these are all contracted services because there's such a shortage in those providers that are very hard to employ. So therefore we contract out. So that for that bill to pass would be highly detrimental for the ability of the school system to provide the services they need to do for our students. And then the next one, House Bill 1400, student use of force. This is a very interesting bill. But it's, I did contact our student services department as well as our safety, security, and security services department. And both were not in support of this, in the sense that, so to some degree, you know, if a student is in a situation where they're getting bullied or his kids are picking on them or physically starting to attack them, you can see why you'd want a child to, you might want a child to defend themselves and take reasonable force against the student, the other student. However, it increases the potential for actually more injuries to occur, more damage, as well as that means in terms of like you would have to be constantly, I mean, what is reasonable force, and trying to make a determination many times very subjectively in terms of what would be appropriate for the use of force. And our safety and security services feel strongly that there would need to be mediators in every school that could work through this and mediate the issue with the students in order to be even able to deal with the fact that students could fight back if they were in a situation. So that is why that's being opposed also. And that bill is a bill that's coming up on March 6th also. So if you want to keep scrolling down, Cindy. And the next one, this one is Prince George's County Student Support Specialist Network and Success Action Plan. This particular bill requires that we would have committees in every single high school made up a wide range of employees. Your psychologists, your social workers, your counselors, your principal, your vice assistant principals, a wide range of people meet on a monthly basis, probably monthly or regular basis, to analyze data, to identify why is like attendance poor, or why is discipline, you're having discipline issues, or where are we in terms of how students are performing academically. And in getting the information from the student services, there are so many things that are in place right now that we do provide in terms of loads and loads of committees that work within the schools, probably 5 to 8 committees that work either addressing individual students' needs or looking collectively at what's happening in the school, as well as Maryland State Department of Education evaluates each one of our schools on a wide variety of factors. And if in fact you fall below in each of these areas, you get put on the list and you're actually required to put a plan together, and then you are constantly being monitored by MSDE throughout the year, looking at your data to identify what is wrong and what needs to move forward. So it would be highly redundant, and I believe the first year cost for that would be like $5 million. So that's why that one was in opposition. And then we have Senate Bill, let's see, 762, which is Maryland Civil Excellence Program. And that one, let's see if I can find it here. It has to do again with just quickly curricular mandate, which of course we're going to oppose, as well as I'll say Senate Bill 980 is similar in that it has to do with opposing the curricular mandate. And then local cybersecurity preparedness and local cybersecurity support funds. So that when the requirements that they're putting in place in terms of being able to use the particular, do all the things they need to do for preparedness, it's very prescriptive and tells you exactly what you have to do. The cost would run about $500,000. And we already have things in place to address all of those, and many of the other school systems do. So that is why that was opposed as well. And then Senate Bill 1058 again was in opposition, and that was because of the curricular mandate. Many of these in the opposition group are really just curricular mandates. And I think, are we near the end here, Cindy? Okay, okay, bills for discussion. So can we bring this back up? Just scroll up again because it starts a little bit higher than that one. Okay. Bills for discussions. So the ones that I think are important ones to have a conversation about are the one, it has to do with the state and county superintendent of schools employment contracts and school leadership course of study. So right now, the superintendent, and we don't have a position. So if the committee has a position, that would be good. Then we could certainly put that onto the tracker. Currently, to hold the position of superintendency in the state, you must hold a superintendency certificate, which is issued by MSDE. And that means that to secure that certificate, you have had to have taken appropriate courses to in order to be the superintendent. So the bill now is requiring an additional requirement for the position. Then you would be also paying, the school system will be paying the superintendent to take the course at an institution of higher ed. And again, that probably would be something that might be negotiated into their contract with the board, so that they that would say they're required to take this training and the board will pay for the cost of the training. So I don't, I'm not sure what your thinking might be on that, but that might be one that you would like to discuss to come up with a position. And I don't know. So that's one to think about. And then the other, if you scroll down further, so the county boards of education, student members of this one I wanted to bring up because Rain and I have had a couple conversations about it. And I actually ended up contacting the policy analyst, which goes to, and I can I just speak a minute about our policy at that moment, because it sort of all goes together so that it makes sense for this, that I think gives insight into this bill. So if you remember last time we met and we talked about the student board member and the voting rights, and that when we looked at LexisNexis and OGC looked at it, Dennis looked at it, looked like they had only written into the law the rights of the certain voting rights for this past year, for starting in 2023, July 1, 2023, and then July 1, 2024, these rights went away and language in the bill went back to what it was previously. So I contacted the policy analyst that was assigned to the fiscal note for that bill last year. And he actually then contacted several people within his organization, and they re-looked at the bill. And so, as it turns out, he said that the bill is actually pretty difficult to comprehend because there's so many pieces to it. This is House Bill 1079, and that from last year, and that the keeps changing the data when this is for that and which is for this. And so evidently LexisNexis didn't quite get it right. So he took me to MGA. They actually put the codified version further in another part in their program. And so he took me to there, and it actually laid it out, and the student board's members' rights will continue on for forever until another bill comes and changes it. So after this year, then those rights will be in place for next year too, except that I did ask the question because Rain had said that she had gotten information that said that Senate Bill 386 / House Bill 456, that those were, that bill had been amended, and so it wouldn't change the student voting right. And he said, no, that actually that does impact the different school systems, and that would be, that would actually, would change the voting rights of our student board member if the bill got passed. Now, whether it might not, who knows, but I'm thinking this is one that maybe we do want to take a stance on it. This is the Senate Bill 386. So I don't know. So that's another one that we might want to have a conversation about. And then I think I hit everything in the exchange. Cindy, can you scroll up a minute just to make sure I didn't miss anything? I think that's it. So I know that's so much to go through at one time. So I think we hit all of them. So are there any specific questions about any particular bills that we can talk about in more detail? You sort of I gave you just quick oversight on these bills.
Yeah. Well, I want to first start by saying thank you, Mrs. Welsh, for going through just probably 15% of that list. So it's just as extensive. It's a lot happening in Annapolis, and it's a lot to keep track of in addition to the details of the bill. So we just want to recognize you for that. I'm going to go to Rain Rivera Forbes, and Cindy, if we can have the timer up for questions to bills that have been discussed. Board Member Rivera Forbes.
Awesome. Thank you. Sorry that my camera is off. I did just get home from school, but I first wanted to thank you, Ms. Welsh, on everything that you went over for sure, and definitely getting clarity on HB 1079. I know this has been in discussion for a long time, and it's definitely been something that we were looking for a good answer on, and I'm happy that we received an answer that's very positive for the future student members of the board. I know that you did say that amendment was not submitted. Now, I don't know what I heard from the delegate. I know we testified, and the day I did testify, the delegate that I testified with did specifically state that they submitted an amendment to the committee we were in, which was the Ways and Means Committee for the House of Delegation. But I may not be exact, so I'm going to also reach out to the delegate as well, just to double check and make sure that amendment was submitted for the House bill of SB, I think 456. Did you? Yeah, for the House bill version, because I know for that bill, they did say they put an amendment through publicly. So I'm just going to double check on that.
And Rain, I don't know for a fact that they didn't do an amendment, but what he did say that that at this point, the bill shows that if it were to pass, that it would impact the voting rights of our student board member, because the bill breaks it out by county and county. Now, I have a feeling that the bill might not pass only because the legislature just collectively put all these all the counties in there. And I think many counties do not want the legislature dictating that's sort of a county thing, that they would talk to their own delegates to try to move forward. So it'll be curious to see what happens, but yes, please do see what other information you can find out.
Great. Going to Vice Chair Walker.
Oh, thank you, Ms. Welsh, for that update, and I will contact you offline.
Okay, thanks.
Hey, and thank you so much. Just wanted to reiterate, thank you for all of the work that you've done on this. I did want to know, and I guess Chair Briggs, you can bring this up after. I wasn't clear on what the amendments were that Board Member Rivera was pushing on, Rivera Forbes was pushing for. I wasn't clear on what that revision was, so maybe we can come back to that, because that wasn't my initial question. The piece that I wanted to talk about was for how are we ensuring that this, I know the answer, I believe, but how are we ensuring for the public that this information gets back to the delegation for our support with amendments, our opposition, and our support? I just think it's important to say, even though I know the answer because I'm on the subcommittee. But then the other piece of that is, as we go forward for the ones that's for March the 7th in the hearings. I'm just hoping that you can talk about the ones that Ms. Welsh specifically called out. That would probably make sense for us to be there for hearings, unless you wanted to do that offline, because I would love to testify for a couple that she talked about tonight. Thank you.
I believe you're addressing that to me. I was confused for a second. Are you addressing those to me?
Yeah, there were 3, and yes, they were all to you. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, so as far as the way that we share this information is we send out a memo to we've started sending out memos to the committees at the beginning of the week with priority bills that we've discussed, and as well as this list that we have here that kind of goes through our stance, whether we support or oppose or support with amendments. So we'll continue that process. As far as discussion around bills that were discussed by Mrs. Welsh, because we really take it week by week at this point, as you know, Vice Chair Walker, we're gonna again have a discussion this week about bills that are coming up next week, and then we will flag those for board members. We've also the email that I shared with the committees, I also shared with the board, and so we'll flag those in that email, in a separate email to board members. So that'll be the process. We're getting it down. It's not perfect, as you know, but I think we're getting better. And I think that the more we do it, it'll just become, you know, rote memory. And so we'll be able to kind of get things out faster and turn them around faster. Okay.
Yeah, I think it looks like progress. I think it's amazing. I just think we just needed to let the public know. I think it's awesome. We should be cheering and saying, yay, yay, yay. I
Yeah, you
think absolutely. And I think the next piece that I was looking for was the I know that the March 7th one we'll talk about. I think we still have the details to talk about, but because some of us are going there this week, I can talk to Ms. Welsh about the ones that are priorities for us to be able to talk to. I was just specifically looking for those that she had talked about today, but no worries. Thank you.
Yes. Mrs. Welsh?
And I was gonna say, I can certainly send you a list of the ones, like for the ones that I referenced on today in terms of
Thank you.
our position as far as for a week ahead. I know Shelby already sent for this coming week, but it might be helpful to have the information now, because if you actually want to write testimony, you absolutely have to have it in 24 hours in advance. So if we're meeting on Friday, sometimes that makes it a little bit difficult to get that information out. So I can just pull from this list of ones and send it over.
Thanks.
And if there's any way, Mrs. Welsh, to Vice Chair Walker's point, to standardize that would be so helpful, because I feel like there are things where board members want to, you know, provide testimony. They want to know in advance. And we have our meetings, but I don't feel like they're always in enough time, to your point, to when they're looking at the next week. So if there's some way to like look 2 weeks ahead, which is what you're going to do, in response to the question, I would love it if we could probably have that like be a continuous thing.
I have an idea on that, only because it already exists, is if you just star the ones that are for hearings and that we should be actually testifying for, because the document exists for like the one you went over, that would be helpful so that our chair, like Chair Briggs, can then help us to decide who from the board will be there. So a simple star, I think, would be more than appropriate for the hearing testifying, and then we can get ourselves together based on that, because then we can look back at the tracker, which is also amazing, and also look at the details. And then in our next meeting, we can update it, but at least we would have already put in for public comment. So I'm happy with that. So it doesn't add work.
And I'll talk to Shelby about this, because she always comes up with good ideas for things like this. But I'm thinking even starring it, but also giving you the actual date of the hearing, that because that triggers in your mind that, oh, I have this amount of time, I need to get testimony in by such. If I just, you know, if you decide you want to do a letter or you want to testify, that kind of thing. So we'll come up with something. We can absolutely star the things that are currently on the exchange and add a little bit of information there.
Yeah, I think we can probably have this conversation offline for
Sure.
getting clear on everything. But yeah, appreciate the presentation, and then I do want to have a conversation about the superintendent bill too, that you mentioned. And I did want to just really quickly, Mrs. Welsh, because we went through that early education and early elementary and pre-K bill. Which numbers those were?
1441 and 1445.
Yeah. So I did want to say that there were some things in there, because I know that board members and just folks listening, there was something about I think for HB 1441 the kindergarten teachers only needing to have an associate's degree versus a bachelor's, right? And there was apparently interest from MSEA, from MACO, but to your point, that would also open the door to the certification piece and that conversation being an issue. So just wanted to, I think you mentioned it, but that sounds very, appealing, because it's like we can get teachers, a lot more teachers in. They don't have to have bachelor's degrees. Also, there's the pay issue that exists there. Associates is a lot more affordable, as well as pay is closer. So just wanted to name that and see if you had anything that you wanted to add in addition to, I think, any board members that might have interest in saying, well, wait, why do we oppose that? You've already mentioned it, but just wanted to flag that.
So one of the things when they discussed it, when they brought it up at the May meeting, which I thought was interesting, is that that whole issue came up. And so several of the May board members, they were like, no, we don't want to lower standards. Plus, it actually goes against what the blueprint says. Or the blueprint is about having very highly qualified teachers to do the work. And so this goes against that. And there were people that absolutely felt strongly that there should be we should maintain our standards for certification. But then there was other people that said, yeah, but look, then we can get, for the reasons you just mentioned, maybe we get more teachers. They only have to get the associate's degree, it'll cost less money, all these different things. So I think you could probably make the argument on either side. It really depends on what is your priority in terms of, with the board members, with the students. So and what you want for the students to receive. So it's one of those, controversial issues. And our staff, of course, feels strongly we should maintain those standards.
Yeah, exactly. And I just wanted to name that because I know that they were saying that specific bill wouldn't impact the board as much as it would teachers and their, certification process. So we can move on. I'm sure those are conversations we can have at a later time. I do want to be mindful of time. So we're going to move to item 3.2, blueprint implementation update. I want to mention that we're going to work to get Dr. Libby to join our next Policy and Governance Committee meeting to share more about the blueprint implementation plan, because there are some updated pieces that are needing to be submitted from the school board and from PGCPS about the blueprint. And we want to ensure that all board members have access to that information, because we are integral parts of the development of the blueprint plan. So more to come. Dr. Libby will be at our next P&G meeting. And then we're going to move to item 3.3, legislative update. Ms. Welsh, you've already provided the committee with the legislative update. So if there are no other pieces, we'll move to item 4.0, which are items for discussion. So there are now 4. Oh, yep. You're muted. Ms. Welsh, you're muted.
I just received an email this evening from the policy analyst, one of the policy analysts, who said that next week the bill is coming up for the House Bill 376, study of feasibility for relocating the Prince George's County Public School System headquarters. And it's an opportunity for us to provide any fiscal or operational impact statements, if we could have it into them by Friday, because they would incorporate that into the fiscal and policy note. And so at this point, and when I pulled the bill up to read it, it does say that I thought they were going to change it, but this particular bill that I pulled up off of MGA says the Prince George's County Council shall cover the cost of the study conducted under this section. But I thought they had changed that so that the Board of Education, so I don't know if MGA did not update that or not. I don't know. I'm just, and what are people's thoughts? Because I can certainly incorporate that into the fiscal note, into the worksheet we have to send them.
I'm going to go to Vice Chair Walker, who seems to have some ideas on or opinions on this. Vice Chair Walker.
Yes. From the last that I talked to the sponsoring senator, it was going to be asked for the Board of Education to fund it wholeheartedly. However, I do think that because the document in front of you, maybe something has changed since then. Maybe we can provide if and. I think that would be really helpful for the fiscal note. Does that make sense, Ms. Welsh?
If we can provide, I didn't hear that last part. If we could provide.
Sorry, my voice. I was going to say if and. So
Yeah.
if it is the Board of Education only, and it's both. And the reason why I say that is because the last that I spoke to Senator Washington about this, whose bill it is, it was for the Board of Education to fully fund it. So I think it would be important for us to do it. Now, mind you, something might have changed since then. So the point is, you have a document in front of you that's a little different than what I have been led to believe. So I think just providing it, given that it's Friday, would be helpful if we provided both thoughts.
Okay, perfect.
Chair Briggs can give direction on that. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would just say, Mrs. Welsh, if you can share that information via email with us, because I actually don't have, I've not had that conversation with you about it. So I would prefer to just,
And I just got it. So yeah,
Okay.
I'll do that.
yeah, so that we can all just be informed on it. I think that can be the good next step.
And so did you say that you'll have your assessment done before Friday? Because it looks like she has a deadline to get that back.
Well, yes, so
Mr. Briggs.
whatever the deadline
Okay.
is, if you share it with us this evening, or whenever you can get it to us by tomorrow morning, then we can get a response to that by the deadline is the goal. We're just having that shared immediately would be very, very helpful.
Okay, I can do that. Not a problem.
Okay, so we're going to move to item 4.0, items for discussion. There are now 4 other policies for discussion. Each discussion round per person will be 2.5 minutes, as it's been. And we're going to start with item 4.2, policy 5125, student records. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on the policy 5125, student records, and policy 5126, student information.
So, when reading both those policies, they really go hand in hand. So if you had gone back and looked at the work plan, you would see that the work plan actually says that we might condense those 2 policies into one. So after I read through what we currently have, and I looked at other systems, policies, and procedures, it's the records and the information, they always seem to go together. So what I did was condense the 2 policies and call it student information and records, so that it brings up both. And basically, it's this policy, it's really driven by law for the most part. And but the policy statement talks about the fact that the board does respect and recognize the rights of parents to inspect and review their child's student records. And if they think it's incorrect or misleading, that they can request for removal or change of the records. And if you scroll down, Cindy. And then, of course, the fact that, though, it's really critically important that we maintain our student records and the information about the students and everything as efficiently as possible, because it's important information that can be used for planning educational programs for students while the students are in school, as well as post-secondary opportunities. So that was the statement for the policy statement for the board. And then the purpose of this is really to provide guidelines and ensure compliance with the federal and state laws for collecting, maintaining, and releasing information about students that is contained in student records. So then I have a long list of definitions, and I'm not going to go through every single one. I will point a couple out. So if you just scroll down, Cindy, for each of the definitions. So directory information is important. Can you stop 1 second, please, right there? So this is information that's contained in a student's record of a student. It might have and each school system can designate what they consider to be directory information. It's going to be the student's name, their address, possibly like if they're in sports, which sports they participate in. There's a wide variety of things. And actually I had it and then I erased it, but our student code, rights and responsibility handbook actually lays out what has been identified as student records, student directory information. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, and I can pull that up in a minute, but I'll take you through the policy first. So they'll reference throughout the policy eligible student, and in that instance, when they're referencing eligible student, they're actually talking about a student who's 18 years or older, because they can, once you turn 18, you can make your own decisions about your records, and not the parents. So then if you scroll down further, personally identifiable information. So, and that's often, you'll see reference to that in this policy as well as other policies. So that includes many things, in this instance, student's name, parent's name, parent member's name, address of the student, a social security number possibly, or a student number, any possible personal characteristics that would be possible to identify the student. Just there's a wide variety of things within that range, and that's referenced in the policy. So if you continue further down, Cindy. And then keep going. Oh, I have a mistake there, but you have records, keep going. Student records include, but it's not limited to, that lays those out. And then what it does not include, I do need that correction. Anyway, all the standards are from, they're actually pulled out of FERPA, out of the federal and state law to look at different things. So these are basic standards in terms of student records. All schools and programs in possession of student records must adhere to this policy and the company administrative procedure and all applicable laws and regulations, including Code of Maryland regulations. 13A08, there's an error there, 0.2. That particular COMAR regulation lays out in great detail a lot about how we're supposed to be maintaining our records for students' records. And then we also talk about the fact that we also need to keep our records in accordance with the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act and the procedures that go along with that, as well as the Maryland Student Records System Manual. And then also, the records should be retained in accordance with Board Policy 2600. So if you recall, not very long ago, we just did Policy 2600. So these two are going to be very related, and one has to sort of piggyback on the other. Then we absolutely, it's the responsibility of the school system to advise parents of the current students and eligible students annually of their rights under FERPA. And the rights must be, and they are published in our Students' Rights and Responsibility Handbook. And then the superintendent should be responsible for developing a process for parents to inspect and review their child's student record and request an amendment of the student record when they need to. And then if you scroll down further, Cindy, yep. The superintendent also must establish a process for schools to review student records for accuracy and relevancy when a student transfers to the next higher level. So that would be from elementary to middle school, then middle school to high school. And then when students graduate from high school or withdraw for any reason. So, and this is important as a principal, you are held accountable. And this would be in the administrative procedure, but the principal is held accountable for making sure that anything in a student's record is up to date and that it's accurate information and it's maintained in a way that you can manage it. And the state of Maryland actually gives you guidance on how to maintain the records and in what order. And then the only time that we would, that disclosure of students' personal identifiable information has to come from we can do that, but we have to receive from the parent or the eligible student a signed and dated written consent. And then we can disclose personally identifiable information. And if it's been designated as directory information without the consent of parents, however, and we do have this in our Student Rights and Responsibility Handbook, parents or eligible student can opt out of having their directory information released. And they're given a time period for when they complete this form and send it in. And then it's the school's responsibility to hold on to that so that they make sure they never share that kind of information. Like, you know, how you see a list of students that are on teams or whatever, that you would not be allowed to do that if the parent had opted out. So again, that's an important responsibility of the principal to have a system in place to be able to identify all of the students who maybe their parents have opted out. And then if you scroll down, my husband just opened the door and my dog just came in and he was trying to get her out to go to the restroom, go to the bathroom. Anyway, so then let's see what else. And parents are supposed to be notified of that, the opt-out for the disclosure yearly. Also, the school system shall provide on request made by military recruiters or institutions of higher ed access to students' names and address and telephone number, unless, again, the parent has provided notification in writing that they do not want that information released. And the purpose of the release of the information, this is driven by law, is to inform students of educational and career opportunities available in the military and institutions of higher ed. And then the transfer of student records within Prince George's, from school to school within Prince George's County Public Schools, as well as to other school systems, other counties or other states, is driven by in accordance with the Maryland State Department of Education's Maryland Student Record System Manual. And then, of course, our administrative procedures also address that. So that would definitely be, we'd be responsible for that. And then finally, if you keep scrolling down, it says that all student records shall be treated as confidential in accordance with federal, state laws and regulations. And no staff member shall furnish or use any list of students' names or addresses for sending of advertising or any other purpose unless a specific approval is given in advance by the superintendent or designee, and that the superintendent shall take appropriate disciplinary action against any employee who's found to have committed acts of unauthorized release of student records. Because that is extremely serious, to release any information about a student that you're absolutely not allowed to do. And then scroll down further, and then it just says that the superintendent is directed to develop administrative procedure to implement this policy. And if you look under legal, Cindy, if you scroll down, you will see that there are a wide variety of laws that address all of these things that are incorporated into this policy. And that's it.
Okay, the floor is now open for discussion and comments. And Mrs. Welsh, I know that this was policy 5125 and policy 5126. Did you want to walk through policy 5126 too, or do you
It's
want
the
to?
same thing. I put them all together.
Oh, they're already are.
So they're already one, and we will be coming up with a new number to go with that. So
Okay. Understood. Okay. Okay, I don't see any questions. The only question that I have for you, Mrs. Welsh, is that I think what would be really helpful for me is if there's like at the top of the introduction or at the end, just a reminder of why this policy was brought up for discussion. Because I know that I know sometimes we pull them up because they haven't been updated in a while, or there may be a board member or someone who's suggesting that we change it for a specific reason. This one's a really important one. So I don't have particularly any recommendations for this policy, because you said that there's already laws around the storage of it based on federal law, so that employees already have to follow that. So I was just curious to know a bit more about why, and if there's nothing there now, that's fine.
So just to let you know, so that both these policies were on the list. If you recall, 9340 says that the superintendent must provide a list of policies, recommend policies for the upcoming school year. So these two were on the list, and when they actually were included, I think there was a notation that talked about the possibility of condensing the two and putting them into one policy. And it was because the one policy actually even addresses No Child Left Behind. So they're out of date. So that's why they had to get updated. And then it made more sense to incorporate and put them together. So that's why.
Okay, yeah, that's from the early 2000s. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
All right. Well, if there are no other questions, colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion?
Advance for action.
Okay. Any objections? All right. So, Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Policy 5125 and 5126 to advance for action at the next P&G meeting.
Okay.
We're going to move to item 4.4, bylaw executive session. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on the new policy bylaw executive session. Mrs. Welsh.
Cindy, will you show it for us, please? So just So again, this takes us back to bylaw 9360. So each week, each month, each meeting, I want to bring up a new section of 9360 for you. So 9360 had a whole section that addressed executive sessions. So now this particular one is just the previous one. We did regular board meetings. So now this is specific to executive session. And basically, again, this is actually in the law where it talks about what is allowed to be discussed in executive session. And I know looking at the minutes that the board has for executive session, it'll say that you have discussed you're going in to discuss. It doesn't give the specifics, but it lists out which are the areas within the law you're going to be addressing. And then afterwards is when you come back out to have follow up, and you're voting on something. It's not, again, the very specifics, but it goes back to these reasons that you are doing it. So just very briefly, and again, this is all driven by the law. One is you're going to go into executive session to discuss appointment, employment, assignment, promotion, anything to do with employees, basically, if all personnel matters. And so executive session also is considered a confidential session. It's not open to the public. Your minutes are not open to the public. It's all confidential. So personnel definitely is a main reason. Then protect the privacy and reputation of an individual with respect to a matter that is not related to public business. That might be another reason to go in. Considering the acquisition of real property for public purposes and matters directly related to the acquisition. Consider a matter that concerns the proposal for a business or industrial organization to locate, expand, or remain in the state. Consider the investment of public funds. Consider the marketing of public securities. Consult with counsel to obtain legal advice. Consult with staff, consultants, and under individuals about pending or potential litigation. Conduct collective bargaining negotiations or consider matters that relate to negotiations. Discuss public security if the board determines that public discussion would constitute a risk to the public or to the public security, including the deployment of fire and police service and staff and the development of implementation of emergency plans. Prepare, administer, or grade a scholastic licensing or qualifying examination. Conduct or discuss an investigative proceeding on actual or possible criminal conduct. Comply with specific constitutional, statutory, or judicially imposed requirement that prevents public disclosure about a particular proceeding or matter. Discuss before a contract is awarded or bids are opened a matter directly related to a negotiating strategy or the contents of a bid or proposal if public discussions or disclosures would adversely impact the ability of the board to participate in competitive bidding or proposal process. And then discuss cybersecurity. If the board determines that public discussion would constitute a risk to the security assessments or deployments related to information resources technology, or would constitute a risk to network security information, including information that is related to passwords, personal identification numbers, access codes, encryption, and other components of security system of a government entity, or that there's a risk to collected, assembled, or maintained by or for government entities to prevent, detect, or investigate criminal activity, or related to an assessment made by or for a government entity or maintained by a government entity of the vulnerability of a network to criminal activity. And then the last one is deployment of implementation of security personnel, critical infrastructure, or security devices. So all of these particular items are really important things that do need to be conducted or discussed in a closed session, either because of the confidential nature they are and you're protecting the privacy of individuals, or in terms of the operations of the business that the school system is involved with, or the safety and security of the school system and the staff and students within the system. So that, and again, that's it. That's the Opens Meeting Act, and that lays that out for you. And then it says that, again, upon proper notice, the board may hold an executive session meeting at any time. And you have done that many times. I've seen that on the board docs. The majority of the board members present and voting must vote in favor of moving into executive session. And then before the board meets in executive session, the presiding board member must conduct a recorded vote on moving into executive session and then make a written statement for the reasons for moving into executive session, including a citation of the authority found in the above that you listed, the topics listed above. And then a written statement shall be a matter of public record. So, and you have that, I see that in your minutes all the time where you've moved into executive session to address blah, 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 that type of thing. And then the director of the board office shall keep a copy of the written statement for at least 1 year after the date of the executive session. And all matters discussed in executive session will be treated as confidential by board members and all parties in attendance. So if you're in that meeting, then you can't walk out the door and start talking about it. And that no final action may be taken in, and I need to change that, executive session. Provisions for statements of positions or questions on point or order shall be made in regular board meetings. But the director of the board office shall provide an accurate record of all business transacted in the executive session. And there is no public comment during an executive session. Now, there will be, as we move through this process for 9360, there will be a whole section related to like the minutes for executive session, because we'll have a bylaw called minutes, and then it'll talk about what we do with minutes for the board meeting, regular board meeting, and then for executive session, and then or even like our meetings, these the different committees that you have. So so that'll get addressed in there. So that's basically it in a nutshell. This is basically, I made very little changes. This is directly from what we had all agreed upon in 9360, but I certainly wanted to make sure you had a chance to see it as it sits alone by itself.
Oh, great. Okay, awesome. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. Mr. Whitley.
Mr. Chair, do we want to send a copy of this to the parliamentarian for his input?
It's like you literally were thinking exactly what I was going to say, because we had a whole presentation, Mrs. Welsh, about.
I heard it.
Okay, perfect. We went to the dais now, and there's a whole thing. So I think so. Let's do that. I appreciate the recommendation. That's exactly what I was going to say. And yes, I agree. We should absolutely send this to the parliamentarian just to look over it.
So will you do that, Chair Briggs, or how's that work? Or Cindy will send it over? Or?
If Cindy sends it to me, I can send it to him. And I can send it through the superintendent. Yeah, through our process that we have. And Mrs. Welsh, and Mr. Whitley, I'm probably going to need your help here. So I actually did have a question about the previous policy. So I wanted to backtrack from this one. If there are no questions about this one, do I need to close this one out and go back, or can I say something about the previous policy?
But is this coming back for discussion? Do you want to close this one out and then?
Let's close this one out. Yeah, okay, I'll do that. So since there's no discussion, colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion?
Excuse me, what if the parliamentarian makes changes? Then it probably needs to come back to the committee.
Yeah. You know what? I'm having a blonde moment here. So I'm going to recommend, that's the obvious thing to do. So Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on the new bylaw, and bring it back for action at the next P&G meeting, where we will have comments from the parliamentarian. Vice Chair Walker.
Well, so, I'm sorry, but if you bring it back to action, and if I'm also sending it to General Counsel, and they have some statements, and the parliamentarian has some there could be a contradiction like that.
I meant bring it back for further discussion.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That was an accident on my part. That's what I meant, was further discussion. Vice Chair Walker.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring attention to the fact that my hair is colored blonde, and Miss Welsh is.
I was going to say the same thing.
Put that out there. Okay. And also just a heads up that I have to leave. I just didn't know if there was any additional voting that needed to happen while I was here.
We have one more policy, if you can.
Okay, sure. Thank you.
So I want to just go back really quickly to item 4.2. Cindy, can you advise?
Oh, I was just going to say to Ms. Walker, we do have policy 5.1, regular board meetings that actually do require a vote.
So it'll actually be
Because that one is going out for public comment. It's going to the board.
so time-wise.
You on mute. I was saying you on mute. We couldn't hear you.
Oh, I was just asking around time-wise. He was getting to that thing.
Yeah, time-wise, probably like 15 minutes. I'm just going to make a recommendation really quickly. So for item 4.2, I was just going to say, Ms. Welsh, and I can probably send you comments offline, but I was thinking about cybersecurity. I know we had this whole cybersecurity breach, and with students' information, just wanted to consider anything that might need to be in that bill around that. I think we can just talk about it offline, but wanted to mention that.
Okay.
So I'm going to move to item 4.5, bylaw 9210 chair. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on bylaw 9210 chair.
Find my policy. I think I had too many things going on. Okay, the chair. Cindy, can you share that? Thank you. So I listened twice. I listened to the video related to the chair and tried to make sense of our conversation in terms of where everyone wants to go. So what I was wondering, and I'm certainly open to any suggestions you have, but if you scroll down, Cindy, we never did define temporarily, but there's also language that talks about vacancy, which I did put a definition in for that because I thought maybe we defined that and that meaning, like, let's say, I don't know, tomorrow, Judy Meckens Murray's husband gets a transfer or something, they move out of state or something, and we still have the rest of the year, then that would be considered a vacancy versus temporarily, maybe, I don't know, she has surgery and she might be recovering for 6 weeks, so she'd missed 3 board meetings. That might be considered temporarily. Now, I'm just saying that in the context. Now, Cindy, if you'll scroll down to the other part, I have it highlighted. So we had, in the event of vacancy in the office of the chair, the vice chair will assume the responsibility of the chair until the annual meeting in December in which the election for the chair will be held. So that's vacancy. So it means she's not coming back. So there it would be, in this instance, Lolita would be filling in. Then I have, if the vice chair does not want to assume the responsibilities of the chair, then the board will elect a replacement for the chair. Wait a minute. Oh, right. If the chair, if by chance there's a vice chair, because that was part of the conversation last time was, well, maybe not every vice chair wants to have the responsibilities of the chair. So generally they would move into that position, but if not, then the vice chair, there would have to be an election if the vice chair did not want to become the chair. Then the next one is, in the event of a vacancy in the office of the vice chair, the remaining board members shall elect a replacement at the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board, which is what someone said. Now, if you scroll down one more time, Cindy. And then I have or, so this could be other language that could be put in, or in the event of a vacancy in the office of the vice chair, the chair will select a replacement for the vice chair position. Listening to the video, I felt like I didn't hear any consensus one way or the other, but I did hear a conversation related to both. So I put both those pieces of language in there with the idea that tonight maybe we could clarify which one do you want, and then I'll take the other one out. And then if we can sort of try to get a sense of how long do you consider temporarily that it's okay then for the chair to return, something like that. So I don't know. Those were my best thoughts.
Thank you, Mrs. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. You will be recognized in the order of your raised hand. Okay, Vice Chair Walker.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Welsh, for pulling that together. The first piece around temporary definition, I tend to believe, I think you guys coached me on this earlier and in other meetings as well, as to not put too much definition in it, but around temporary itself, I would think that, it should not exceed 6 months. I'm just putting that out there for us to be able to have a discussion on what that looks like and feels like. The other piece around that, and I'm happy to talk about the duration, but I think a duration will be more appropriate than an instance. That's my thought. And then the second, for the committee to discuss now. And then the second piece, I think your clarity was really around if the vice chair role becomes vacant, which could be because they moved into the chair role. So there's a vacancy. The point is that the person's not in that role anymore. Then how do we fill that role? And I think last week what was said was from some of the committee members is since we're moving to elections, then it should be an election versus it being an appointed, because I was in favor of then of an appointment happening, but I'm absolutely fine. This is for the committee's perspective for a vote to be taken for that.
Okay.
And all of these, I'm going to say midterm votes are temporary until we have our real election votes, which is in December. So if any of these become vacant in the interim, then it still defaults back to regular elections on December. Like all of this is temporary until our December bylaws that state there's an election. Just want to make sure we can include that as well. I don't know, does that make sense, Ms. Welsh?
So I'm just thinking, you're saying so I think that's the one thing, Dennis was going to put together a letter or whatever for the attorney general. You're talking about the issue of does the board chair leave in July or does she leave in December, depending on how you interpret 1079. And so I think, Dennis, you were gonna.
Oh, I'm not even specifically talking about that per se.
Oh, you're
We can
not?
talk about that in a
Okay.
minute. What I'm talking about in general is if the vice chair seat becomes unavailable, right? It's not filled anymore. It's vacant. That's the word. When it becomes vacant, no matter when it is, it has to obviously be before December. So there's going to be a gap no matter when it is. If I moved, like any instance that could happen, if a vice chair moved out or a vice chair got hit by a bus, whatever the case is, we're going to have a vacancy inside the role. I move, anything can happen, right? If that's the case, then my seat becomes vacant or the vice chair seat becomes vacant. What I'm saying is this clearly would be midterm, what we're talking about, right? Because otherwise we would have already had an election and this wouldn't be necessary for discussion. So because there's going to be a gap between when midterm this is happening to when, I just want to make sure somewhere inside of the policy, it states that these offices or these positions that's now being filled is until our regularly scheduled December votes for office. Does that make sense? Yes, let me give an example. We have a December vote that's coming up, right? Yes. So if anything happens in the interim to that, it's okay because that becomes temporary until we have our elections that happen in December. That's no matter if I got hit by a bus and wasn't vacant or anything like that. We have regular elections that happen in December per our bylaws. That still has to happen. Any policy we enact now is, I'm going to say midterm. Something is happening midterm that's making us have to trigger something else to be had. I hope that makes sense. If not, Dennis, hopefully you understand what the heck I'm saying so you can interpret my babble over here.
No, I understand. I actually, because of the definition I put for vacancy, an occupied position which will remain unoccupied until the annual meeting in December. So then if you look at the language in the actual policy, it says in the event of a vacancy in the office, that's when then we would keep the language that the remaining board members shall elect a replacement in the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board. So
Sounds great.
Okay.
Yeah. It sounds like you're saying the same thing. So, Mrs. Welsh, temporarily for me, I find that 6 months feels like a long time for it to be temporary. So, but I don't know what a good amount of time is. Like, I'm almost wondering if temporary is based on notice. So it's like if the chair says, and Cindy, I want to make sure you keep me on like time, because I don't want to take any more time than anyone else. But that if the chair says, oh, I'm gonna, step away for a personal matter for, a period of time, 2 weeks, I will be away. I feel like a month or more than a month feels like you're stepping down from the role or you don't have the capacity to do the role. So I feel like temporary, it would have to be within like a reasonable amount of time, and 2 weeks seems like a good amount. Maybe slightly.
I'm good with that.
Okay. I don't know if that's helpful, Ms. What, so
No,
I
I'm waiting to hear any other conversation.
okay, all right. And I just want to say for my part, like if it's whatever language feels that fits, like legal language that kind of fits into that, you know, if it's not 2 weeks, right? If it's something that is more loose, but still isn't like, you know, too broad. I just don't think anything more than a month is reasonable for temporary.
Just real quick, I kind of feel like, oh, can I be recognized? Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I'm done and recognizing Vice Chair Walker.
Thank you so much. You know, I just kind of feel sometimes I'm good with the 2 week notice because that's what it feels like. You put a 2 week notice in for a job. But what if something happens like somebody, because now we're talking situations. That's why I was trying to be a little more broad. 6 months is a long time. I'll just say that. I just threw that out there for discussion. But the point is like, what if something happens and somebody has to go to the hospital? I agree that after I'm going to make it up a month of you not being there and the vice chair filling in, then it feels like you need to you're abandoning your job. And so therefore for any reason that we need to move forward with the elections is that, because that, I feel like this is what's going to trigger an election, right? Basically, we're saying a temporary election for temporary purposes until we get to the, I know we're defining temporary and I'm saying temporary, but for pausing purposes until we get to the true election, right? In December. Okay. I'm fine with that. Just that the nervousness or the concern that I have is just that with 2 weeks, it doesn't give, I feel, enough notice for a board to then come back. We only meet once a month really to do board business. And so that's what I was really thinking, is that it just doesn't coincide.
Yeah, okay, sounds like you're done. My request, Mrs. Welsh and Mr. Whitley, is just looking into maybe what other districts do around, if there's any language that exists, and also like what language exists around employment. Because I think we can use that as a standard too. You know, no one's gonna let you work somewhere if it's like past a month. And so I think we should be, but I think also this is a unique situation too. So like we only meet once a month. You don't meet once a month at job. So something that's reasonable. Yes, Mrs. Welsh.
With employees, though, you have FMLA, so you could be out for a long extended period of time, and still have your job.
So then I think again, that would be my recommendation, is to look into what employers say. I'm not an expert here, so if that is a very helpful point, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
Okay.
Vice Chair Walker.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say, because I really got to get on this other Zoom, is, you know, we do have Ravel here who has worked in another county. And so maybe the touch base afterwards, I won't put him on the spot now, but might be able to give some perspective from another district as well, because he's worked with Board of Educations before. So maybe Ravel, you could touch base with Ms. Welsh to give your just, you know, opinion on based on what you've already seen to help with her research. Okay, thanks.
That'd be helpful.
That's great. It's a great point. So I want to make sure we can vote before you leave. So colleagues, should this policy be advanced for action or kept for further discussion? My sense is kept for further discussion. So I'm going to say, Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Policy and Governance Committee on Bylaw 9210 and bring it back for further discussion at the next P&G meeting. We're going to move on to items for review. Item 5.0, there is one item for review or action. Each discussion round per person will be 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. So we're going to move to item 5.1, bylaw regular board meetings. Colleagues, may I have a motion to forward bylaw regular board meetings to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Second.
Great. So it's been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of the new policy.
So basically, again, this is one of the policies or bylaws, I should say, that is it's extension from 9360, and it's addressing the regular board meetings. And the only real change that this bylaw is showing, based on the current bylaw, is that we did change in the where the part of it where it talks about the components of a regular board meeting, and we replaced the words board prayer. So no longer should there be board prayer, and instead of it be replaced with invitation to participate in silent prayer or reflection. And then the other thing we did add was a component called community recognition. So even though it isn't in the current bylaw, that you do it all the time. So that's why it recommended that it would be added as one of the components to this bylaw. So that's basically it. This is just a section of 9360 addressing regular board meetings.
All right. Vice Chair Walker.
Do we not pray anymore in the board? Is it changing what we say? Like it doesn't need to be a meditation or something, or silent? What happens with that?
So when we addressed this, I don't know how far back, several of you had gone to an NSBA conference, and in the conference, there was this conversation about that you should not be actually in a student board, in a board meeting, a Board of Education meeting, that you should not be actually making it that everyone has to pray. And so instead, the recommendation was that you'd invite the participants to an invitation to participate in silent prayer or reflection. So that's what everyone had agreed upon at that time. Now, if you think differently, that's fine, because it hasn't gone to the full board for any kind of vote. It was really in committee conversation.
Okay, well, I have some thoughts, but I'll wait to raise my hand. Thank you.
My hand is up.
Well, I think it's still your time. I'm not sure if the timer was but I think you definitely have more time, Vice Chair Walker.
Okay, no problem. I'm fine with the invitation. I recognize that we have multiple religions that's there. I'm actually fine with but I would like for the Board of Education to even read a meditation that's non-denominational or something that is uplifting for our scholars each time. So I do believe that we should read something, whether we say it's a reflection or an education reflection, something that denotes our commitment to scholars or ourselves, or either our own commitment statement, something just that we read that is reflected, is my point. I think we should still take the onus to read something, and we can say that we invite them to receive the meditation that we are about to give, and it's a short meditation.
Before I go to Vice Chair Rivera Forbes and Board Member Miller, I'm going to recognize Cindy.
Thank you, Chair. One of the suggestions we had back when Mr. Fields was there was that we'd have a moment for silent meditation. And that was one of the items we voted on to add on to the policy back in October 2023.
Yep, I believe that's correct. Yeah, I think it was just a moment of silence so that people could do whatever felt comfortable for them, whether it's prayer, meditation, or whatever other spiritual beliefs people have. So I'm going to recognize Board Member Rivera Forbes.
Thank you, Chair. I actually agree with Vice Chair Walker's view. I think that maybe something motivational, or maybe our mission statement as PGCPS being read instead, if us having a prayer is a problem, might be a better option. A moment of silence is good as well, but just in general, if we say our mission statement, it's very affirming and we know what we're there to do. And that's kind of what the purpose of the prayer was, for guidance of the meeting. So we'll remember what we were there for. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Miller.
Well, I'm very passionate about having prayer. You took prayer out of the schools and they've gone ballistic. So now we're going to take prayer out of our board meetings. This is my personal perspective. However, if we're going to change, I would agree with Board Member Walker to have a meditation. I would not mix a meditation with a mission, because those are two separate, as I see it. They're separate. And we can just go into a meditation and read something uplifting that would be uplifting. And then we can move into our mission, because at our last retreat, we did discuss that we should have, we agreed that we would begin reciting our mission statement at the beginning of every meeting. Now, why that did not start, I cannot say, but that was something that we as a board agreed to. So if we're going to make any changes, I would still suggest that we have a meditation separate and apart from the mission statement, because those are two different, they have two different functions or meanings. Thank you.
Okay. So Mrs. Welsh, I think you're taking all of those pieces under advisement. They're very different. Yes, I do think we need to probably get to like a consensus here around what it is that we're going to do. Mrs. Welsh, I just want to turn to you really quick.
So what I hear is, what I think I'm hearing is that, so you could have both. You could have an invitation to participate in a moment of silent meditation or silent prayer. And then you could also add in a component called the mission statement, a recitation of the mission statement or something, so that you're repeating it each time and so that people are clear. Because it is true that the prayer itself, it was really about just guidance in terms of guiding the board to do what they're supposed to do, you know, and do what's right for kids, really is what the whole purpose of the prayer was. So you could have your mission statement, and then you could have, if that's what I'm hearing. If not, we can do whatever it is that you would like to do.
Okay, well, I recognize.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me put my hard time getting.
Yeah, I think that timer was for Mrs. Welsh, but yes, I can come back to you, Dr. Miller.
Thank you.
Go to Vice Chair Walker, and then I'll recognize.
Yes.
Vice Chair, sorry, Chair. I think that was still Dr. Miller's time. I'm sorry.
Oh, was it? Okay. Thank
Mhm.
you. Okay. Dr. Miller, sorry, that is your timer, and looks like you have a minute and 30, maybe, if we can start it from a minute and 30. That's where I saw it at when she started talking.
Okay, well, my recommendation is that we start off with the meditation, do the flag salute, and then the mission statement. And the meditation can be read it can be read, and depending on the person reading it, because it appears, I don't know, were there any complaints coming in about the prayer? Because the board has been doing this prayer forever. And now we want to change. So I'm not clear on the emphasis of that.
So I think Cindy, Mrs. Welsh, I'll turn to you, but I do remember that I believe it was Board Member Fields who brought it up and mentioned that I think he attended a training or something along those lines and thought that was the idea, was to be culturally sensitive and responsive, was to have different approaches to prayer. So I think that was the intent behind why he brought up that idea. He was the person who brought it up. I don't remember it being something that anyone mentioned as an issue. But Mrs. Welsh, you can clarify.
No, I agree with you. He did bring it up, and I think it was because they had and I think at the time Board Member Mr. Strugler was also on the committee, and they had attended the an SBA conference, at which one of the sessions they attended had to do with prayer in Board of Education meetings, and they recommended not to actually read a prayer or whatever, but that you could have a moment of silent meditation or whatever. I think that's how this all came about.
That makes sense. Okay, I'm going to turn to Vice Chair Walker.
Hi. Yeah, although I'm a fan in my own belief of prayer, what I will say is for us, based on what we're talking about today, I totally agree with Dr. Miller in that we do a meditation aloud, or I even would be okay with us putting it on the screen to invite people to read it as we say it. And then we do our commitment statement and include are we still doing a Pledge of Allegiance?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just wanted to know if that was in the training too.
So next we have to do do the Pledge of Allegiance and then lift every voice and sing.
We should just do them all.
Yeah, I know that sounds like I'm being facetious, but I just think when we get into this religion and prayer and things like that, it just gets to be kind of touchy for some folks. And
yeah, and I was specifically asking about the pledge, not being facetious, but I know that some religions, they just don't pledge to anything. And so I just was wondering how far this training went, was really my question.
Yeah. Vice Chair Walker, do you still have comments? You've got a minute 15. You good? Okay. So I want to say maybe, I don't know. My recommendation is, I'm just curious what the committee thinks about this. I wonder if we throw this question out to the public, because I feel like, I don't want to speak on behalf of a person who is from a different religion or a different background, who may not feel seen in some of those board meetings, and that's the purpose of that training. And so I would want to ask that question to those who are impacted by this decision, to really make it as, I think broad as possible. So maybe I don't know how you all feel about that. If the question that was asked intentionally was, has there been pushback? I would love to know if there are alternatives, what some of the public might think could be those alternatives.
I agree with that, Chair. You're talking about doing a survey, correct?
Yeah, like a survey or something, just kind of asking what alternatives or, recommendations. I think that could help us to kind of narrow it down.
Yeah, rather than just legislating something, let's get what the public feels.
Yeah. Okay. Board Member Rivera Forbes.
Thank you for recognizing me, Chair Briggs. I just wanted to add in that I also think we should reconsult the board members, because I know this is a new board as well, and it'll be an even newer board after my term is up. So it'd just be nice to consult them and see how they feel about this policy as well before we make our final decision.
So Mrs. Welsh, I think that okay, so I mean, we can still forward this to the full board, but is there some way to get public comment? Like, what in the process here, Cindy, where are we at with if we got public comment? Could we put something out there while still forwarding this to the full board?
So after voting tonight, if we support the vote and the motion passes, it goes to the full board to be sent out for public comment.
Oh, okay, great. All right, so we can be, okay, so that works perfectly. So colleagues, are there any objections to forwarding the new policy to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment?
Yeah, but can our recommendation be based on what we just talked about as far as the recommendation, and say that we made it based on input? And so now we're getting their feedback if there needs to be any additional modifications. I just want to get clarity on what we're forwarding on, please.
I do too. So I know what to make sure I have written it here, the correct thing.
Okay, and I do want to mention that there, any background noise, if you're not speaking, if you could just, especially to preserve any conversations you don't want the public to hear. Mr. Whitley?
That's just, as Ms. Wells said, if the board could make clear if we're saying that we're going to forward to the full board, that we're going to do a meditation, flag, and then the purpose statement, or are we leaving it as is? So the board just needs to give us some clarity as to what we're sending to the full board.
Oh, Mr. Chair, may I respond to that?
Yes, recognizing Board Member Miller.
I agree with what Mr. Whitley has said, because we're saying separate things. We're saying send it back, take it to the full board. And then you have suggested doing a survey, which I think would be appropriate as well. So do you want to hold on to this and take the recommendation that a survey be done before we do anything with that policy?
Well, my understanding was that we're seeking public comment, and we could use in that public comment, I don't know if we can include a survey. And then also the recommendation I heard was, let's hear from board members, which we're sending it to the full board for a recommendation. So it felt like it fit with what we're doing right now, the policy as is, with those additional pieces. And we could just include that we are requesting information from the board about this shift, but we haven't made a decision because we were waiting to hear back from the public, aren't we? Right, we're going to have the survey and we're going to get the public comment. So wouldn't that determine the decision? So aren't we just sending the policy as is right now and waiting to hear back from the public before we make a decision? That's how how I was understanding it.
Okay, but you're saying two separate things, as I'm interpreting. Let me put it this way. We're talking survey, and then you're saying public comment. Those are two separate things, because when you do a survey, you're asking the public, what is their preference? Are they for continuing prayer, or meditation. Public comment can come back if we get public comment. That's the other thing. But with a survey, you're sending it out online or to wherever and getting written feedback as documentation. Well, we've received out of the 100 we sent out, 70 people wrote back, 70% wrote back indicating meditation or whatever, prayer. So to say public comment and survey, those are two separate processes.
Okay, so my recommendation is that we I still don't see the point in holding this policy. I think we can still send it out for public comment and send out a survey. I think we can do both at the same time. So that is what I'm thinking. If folks object to that, then let me know that you object, and we can, and if you have a motion for some other way. But my recommendation is that we move forward with sending it out to the board, seeking public comment, while also sending out a survey to the public. We can always make.
That's not what you said at first. So that's why I was making that clear, that those are two separate things. So I'm good with sending it to the input, as well as at the same time develop a survey to send out to the public.
Okay, great. Does that work, Mrs. Walsh? Do you have any? Is that?
That's fine. I mean, I think that probably a public comment period only lasts for 2 weeks. So I'm thinking that whatever gets, I know Cindy sends it out for it to show up in the different newsletters and stuff, that maybe we put some language in there that specifies that as part of the public comment, there will be this survey. We appreciate your survey completing, that we can incorporate all that information in the collection of public comments. But I think somehow you got to get the public's attention, because we don't get that many public comments anyway. So I'm not sure they'll respond to the survey unless we get their attention. Hey, answer our survey for us.
Now, and I also, Cindy just sent me something about we can't say something in our prayer. Cindy, do you want to speak to that before we move forward with this?
No, I was saying at the meeting, because usually you present it to the board, the recommendation to seek public comment. I was suggesting, can we not announce it there at the board meeting? Public would like your input on prayer. What do you think? What is your intake on prayer being taken off policy 9360? Something to that effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Under the chair's report is what I was thinking.
Perfect. Okay. All right. And I'm going to go to Vice Chair Walker, and then I want to make sure.
Yeah. And I'm on 2 Zoom, so I really got to go for real. So if we could just push it forward. So the other thing that I was going to say is, if you do announce that under the chair's report, if you can just also add in our recommendation. So we're just not leaving it out there. Our recommendation, should this move forward, should you have, should there be concerns about it, is this is our alternative. So please let us know if you still, public, are in favor of this, which is what our standard has always been. Or if you're uncomfortable, how does this feel for a solution to make sure that we still are uplifting the community? Something to that effect, so that they have an A or B. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's a good recommendation. And Board Member Rivera Forbes.
Yes, so for public comment, we're meaning just our the constituents that watch the board meetings. They'll decide whether we should have board prayer or not. Because
No.
I'm just a bit confused, since I'm wondering, I know we usually don't consult on things we do in meetings. So I'm just
So it'll be the standard public comment process where we put the information out to anyone in the public. Anyone can respond to it. If you want to tell your mom, your friends, your community about the fact that we have this, which would be perfect. It's a plug for you. And really kind of get people aware about it. Anyone can respond. You're a member of the public. So that is that is public comment.
I wonder, will that give us an accurate review though?
No.
Because I know we have a very diverse population, but not everyone will respond.
Right.
So I personally think we should keep it with just the board, but I'm not against public comment either. I just think if we want accurate results, just between the board, because was this policy already up for public comment before?
Well, so public comment is going to happen regardless. That's going to happen regardless. That's just what we have to do. That's a part of our legal responsibilities. We have to put, anything that we discuss, we have to make the public aware of it. But the survey is a separate piece that I think if you have particular pieces around that, Rain, then we can work to craft a survey that, you know, is accessible for everyone so that we can really encourage. And then we can do some outreach efforts to ensure that everyone responds.
My hand is up.
I want to make sure, Rain, do you
Yeah.
have any?
Yes, I was. Okay, I understand. I know that we have a duty to do public comment. That's not what I'm saying. I know we'll have public comment at the board meetings. I was just because I was confused on how this was being worded. It's being worded a bit all over the place, but I understand now what our goal is.
Okay. And I do want to be clear, when we say public comment, there's an actual like link people can respond to. So this isn't like the people come on to a hearing and provide public comment. There's two separate ways. So that's a different way, but I just want to clarify that for you. Dr. Miller.
I just want to put out there that us making this kind of decision impacts other governing bodies. The state legislature opens up with prayer. Their subcommittees open up with prayer. I'm not sure what the county council does. I haven't been to one, but at one time they did have a moment of silence or prayer. So I'm just I just don't want us to step out there and cause any kind of disruption in other governing bodies' procedures. So I think we might want to think about that as well.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. If you are finished, I mean, I think that's something for us all to kind of chew on and sit with. So I'm going to go to Vice Chair Walker if you're finished, Board Member Miller.
Yes, I'm through. Thank you.
Hey, I just want to, as we make this decision, I do align with Rain on the fact that, oh my gosh, let me turn off my video on this one. Sorry. Is that, I just want to we're choosing to bring this in a different type of style for public comment is what we're talking about. And I just want to be careful that we're choosing one specific policy to bring in this format of, survey when we have a lot of them that I would want to survey the people for, to be honest. But I just want to make, we're individually choosing this one, and probably we have a rationale because it's been such long standing and there's nothing aside from a meeting that asked us to really consider this, but we just need some just definition if we choose this route so that we can let people know why this route is being chosen, which is different than how we normally do things. Thank you. And I agree that we have a public comment just method right now, honestly, that I believe we could use, but I understand the concern because now, because of a meeting, we're triggering a change. I just think if that's the case, we could be able to say that it did trigger our discussion and now we're bringing it here. And these are the two options that we're looking at. We would love your feedback. And then it's up to us to make sure that we're circulating that. We could put a flyer or whatever we want to do, but just it needs to, I believe, stay inside of the policy of what we currently have, because we just run a risk of what triggered us to make sure that this one followed a different one.
I think I understand what you're saying. Okay, so I see hands in the air still. I just want to make sure that those are accidentally up. Miss first, finished, or do you have another question? Board Member Miller.
Mr. Chair, I just can't get it down.
Okay, I can actually lower it for you.
Oh, thank you.
And Cindy, do you have anything?
Yeah, I was kind of going in line with Vice Chair Walker, because my thought too was staying in line with policy. Because when we look at policy, bylaw 9340, we have nothing about a survey. So we don't want to be going outside of policy. So one recommendation I was going to give was to have that survey be created and sent for the board members' newsletters. So that way we are not violating any policies.
Great idea.
Very smart. So, I mean, we can do this. We can just do it in the way where we're staying in the box. So, I think we're still agreeing that we're going to move forward with forwarding the new policy to the full board with a recommendation to seek public comment And then we will separately have a survey that we're going to provide to the public that we'll all work together on to ensure that it is meeting the standards and that it's also reaching broad groups. Are there any objections to forwarding the new policy to the full board with recommendation to seek public comment? Mrs. Welsh.
I'm sorry, I know you want to get done with this policy, but or bylaw. My concern is that I almost think if you want to do a survey, which is fine, that maybe you should do that first before forwarding it to the full board. And then any results we get back that might, and the committee can have a conversation about it. And then decide if they want to make changes to the language, and then from there, send it to the full board. Because if not, your timing might be off. You might go through the whole process, hardly get any public comment, and you end up with this language, and then you get these survey results back. And then you're going, oh, wait, I want to change this policy or bylaw.
I agree. Yeah, I was thinking about that when you were saying what Cindy was saying about the next board meeting. So I think that actually makes sense timing wise. My question is, how do I frame this language so we can move forward past this point? Because that's where I'm struggling. So I just want to make sure that we're moving this forward. Are we holding this policy? Okay.
I'd say you're holding it, and actually probably for discussion at this point, because you're going to get these results back and then from the survey, and Cindy's idea is great to send it out in the newsletter. And then once you have all the results collected, you come back and discuss them and decide if you want to make any more changes to the policy or the bylaw.
All right.
I got another question too. How long are we keeping the survey out? Because this policy doesn't go to the board until March 21st. So we have a long ways to get the survey together before it goes to board approval for public comment. So do we want to hold it until April 25th?
Hold it to June.
I don't mind holding it until June. I don't think it's a huge rush, and I would like to get a robust set of responses on this because it is important.
I don't think so either. Mr. Chair, may I would just suggest holding this one till June.
Yeah, I don't have any objections to that. As far as logistics go, to your question, Cindy, since you asked that question, I would agree with Dr. Miller. If anyone objects to that, then please speak. And otherwise, I'm going to move to questions. So I'm going to go to Board Member Rivera Forbes. Board Member Rivera Forbes.
Can you hear me? Sorry. Okay, my apologies. I don't think there's anything wrong with holding it. I think we can definitely hold it. Well, I don't think we have to hold it until June, but it's understandable if we do.
We can't.
My apologies. I don't think there's anything wrong with us holding it. I don't think we have to hold it all the way till June, but if that's what the committee wants to do, then I'm okay with that as well. We definitely need time if we're going to do a survey. So I don't think forwarding it now will be the best decision considering all the views we got.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, great. And then I'm going to Vice Chair Walker.
Yeah, sorry, I missed. Why are we holding it till June? Because of the new administration?
Yeah, and it's not, I just don't see anything.
It's not emergency, is that what we were thinking? It's like not dire for right now?
Right.
Is that it? Okay, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, I'm fine with that. I just feel like a survey guy, I just feel like we're doing a lot for this one that is out of the ordinary of what we have. And I feel like we can get the same input if we just let people know that this is, I think if we take it to our board for, as we normally do, and then get their input as well as get the public's input, then we can prompt people out with, you know, that, hey, there's a change and this is something you should come to. So I just want us to consider that between now and June. I'm fine with holding it, but between now and that time, if we want to set a precedent for this, what prompts surveys? And then who's doing them, the Policy and Governance Committee? I just think we should think about that. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's the point.
I have one suggestion also. I think maybe it would be good to just do a little bit of legal research on the whole issue of the prayer within Board of Education meetings. I sort of remember them talking about that they separated Board of Education meetings out from other government agency meetings. And so it wouldn't hurt in the meantime, while we're gathering all the survey results, to do a little bit of research just to see if there's anything in the law that maybe causes us to think about it differently or something.
Okay, can you clarify again why, sorry, you were saying the legal reasoning again was for what, Ms. Welsh? This once I didn't land.
So previously they had spoken about Walter, and I think board member Boozer Strother had talked about from a legality standpoint also of not having, because you're talking about students, which oftentimes you have student events going on in board meetings, which it's not, doesn't rise to necessarily the level of mandatory, but it does rise to the level of you can't participate unless you come to the meeting. So to some degree, it is mandatory, and now you are subjecting them to having to have this one period of prayer. So, and I sort of remember this from that conversation. So I'd like to just do, while we're waiting anyway, getting survey results, do a little legal research on it just to see if there's anything out there that gives any direction one way or the other, just so we have that information.
Okay. I think that's really helpful, and that goes with your recommendation to hold. I'm gonna go to student member of the board, Rivera Forbes. If you are speaking, Rain, we cannot hear you. I'm happy to come back to you.
My hand, I'm sorry, my hand shouldn't be up. My computer's live.
Okay, no problem. I'm gonna go to Cindy, and then I think we can wrap this up to move forward.
Yeah, I was just going in line with what Miss Robin Welsh is saying, because while she mentioned it, I looked it up, and it says public school boards are not an integral part of a public school system and must not advance or endorse religion. School boards cannot schedule prayer as part of their meetings. So we might want to research that.
Okay, well, I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna hold this policy. We're going to, so we're not gonna seek public comment on it. We're gonna get some additional research, legal research on it. And I hear us saying that we still want to do the survey, but we'll just have this extended to a little bit later. Okay. All right. So that is our final decision. We're going to move past this policy, and it's being held for further information from Mrs. Welsh, and also for a survey to be released. Cindy.
Sorry again. So since we already moved and seconded the first motion, we got to amend the first motion.
Oh, to second it, right? Okay, right.
What was the first motion?
Yeah, I think that was to recommendation to seek public comment. You're right. Okay.
Then we can just rescind it.
Yeah, let's just rescind that. But that was me. So I'm rescinding the initial motion, and we are instead going to hold the policy and seek additional legal research on it, as well as provide a survey. Cindy.
Sorry again. Dr. Miller was the one that made the motion, so she has to rescind it.
Right, you're right. Okay.
I rescind it.
Okay. All right. And as I said, we've made the statement that we're going to hold the policy, seek additional legal research, and then we're going to release a survey to the public. So we're now going to move on to item 6.0, committee recommendations, new business, governance. There are none. We're going to move on to item 7.0, follow-ups and next steps. Follow-ups from previous meetings will be posted on board docs upon receipt. And next steps, the next Policy and Governance Committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 12, 2024 at 5 p.m. This meeting will be virtual. Please check the PGCPS board webpage for more information. Now moving to closing remarks and adjournment. I want to say thank you everyone for a great meeting, great meeting with meaningful discussions and board policies. Are there any additional business to bring before the committee this evening?
No business, but I'd like to make a comment, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to commend Ms. Adlin on the minutes which she has provided for us, and the research that she's begun to do. I just wanted to make it public. It has been very useful, very helpful, and beneficial to this board member, and I'm sure to others. Thank you, Ms. Adlin.
Yes, Cindy is the resident MVP, if you didn't know, and she knows everything. She just acts like she doesn't, because she's humble. So you always deserve rounds of applause, and we are very, very appreciative, Cindy. So may I have a motion to adjourn the February
Oh,
26th,
yeah.
2020
Second.
meeting? Heard a second. I heard a motion. So it's been moved and seconded. Any objection?
Good night.
Okay, hearing none. The time is now 8:04. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. More to come for additional emails from Mrs. Lush and other steps from myself. So, take care.
Good night.
Rebel, can you call me?
Chair Briggs?
Can you call me when you get a chance?